That's what I'm about. I'm about trying to get people to be happy. It's that simple. That's all. What I wanted to bring up is what I feel like, and I don't know you as well as maybe I could, but what I've heard from many people is that you are someone who believes about the outcomes more than anything, and that you are someone who does not like libertarians. Those are the two things that I heard about you, that you don't like libertarians and that you were about outcomes. And in my view, I think the best outcomes you can possibly have is if they are those that are more carrot, less stick. If they're more, instead of trying to knock down Goliaths, you're more about picking up Davids, localized as much as we possibly can. I think that's the issue. Please go ahead. Mm-hmm. The worry about once you do that, once you start to create, say, government-funded healthcare or government-funded anything, if it's a monopoly, I feel almost every time it begins to fail. I'm not against government-funded anything in theory, as long as there is something else to give someone another option. I'll give you an example.
if you have a single payer system right now, right? Say we decided to make that happen in America. What I'd be afraid of more than anything else is that there'd be a two-tier system. And I see that right now in New York City where I live. The more people bring in lower or cheaper healthcare, for example, either Medicaid, Medicare, the more the better doctors start not taking insurance. And as they stop taking insurance, it creates two tiers, right? So now the wealthy go to the doctors who don't take insurance, and the poorer people go to the doctors who do take insurance. So what you find up happening is more and more of the people who are the have-nots have less choice, less options, often worse doctors. If you look at a doctor office right now, and they take insurance. For example, they take things like Medicaid, Medicare. There's going to be 2 doctors in the office, in the practice, and five administrators who are more worried about photocopying your card than anything else, right? That's what they're going to be most worried about, photocopying your card, your information. You're in the way in that case. I mean, you're in a place to where you sit down at 3 o'clock for your 3 o'clock appointment. You don't get seen till 4:30. At every single time when you leave the doctor, they see you for 5 minutes and they walk away. And then what happens? Well, it ends every time with either a procedure or a prescription or a test, because that's how they get paid. They are incentivized to bill the government for money, or bill the insurance company. The insurance company or the government becomes the actual customer. And the actual customer is secondary and in the way. But if you look at another doctor's office where they actually take just cash, you pay them with a credit card, or you pay them with a check, or whatever you do, or cash, whatever. Now you are the customer. So you show up at 3 o'clock for your appointment. You're seen maybe at 3:05. The doctor spends more time with you, asks you questions like, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? What's your stress level? They don't have to give you a solution to something. They don't have to give you a prescription or a test or a procedure, because they're already paid. You wind up getting higher quality healthcare in a system that's more like that. Now, you can't do that tomorrow, right? There's no way I could just go, well, let's get rid of this tomorrow. But you could create a system to where people start seeing that. You could create a carrot to where now doctors start seeing more value. And an example I had brought up when I was running for office was the idea in New York State, and I'll speak a lot about New York because I know New York the best, but I'm sure it's true in other states too. In New York State, our Medicaid, Medicare bill is huge. $60 million, $60 billion, if not more. It's massive. And most of it gets pushed down to local counties, and they have to raise their tax. There's no more to pay for it in unfunded mandates, and it crushes the local economies. It's a big problem. One of the reasons, there are many, but one of the reasons why so many New Yorkers are leaving the state. So my idea was, actuaries already know about how much someone's going to spend based upon what box they put them in for Medicaid or Medicare. So instead of saying, hey, go ahead and do this, instead, here's a card. Here's a card. It's a debit card with the amount of money that you would normally spend. Spend it any way you want. Just go. Spend the money in a doctor's office any way you like. And what winds up happening at that point is now doctors who don't take insurance can say, wait, so if I market to Medicaid, Medicare, I can get some of that money. Yeah, they'll begin to market to it. Now you can go to the doctors that you choose. You might say, Larry, well, what happens if money runs out? Well, you're still on Medicaid and Medicare. But what should happen is people start to think differently about their healthcare. They'll change how they do things. They'll think differently about it. They'll begin to shop to get better doctors. Doctors should, in theory, lower their prices so that others can go there. And it should get people to want to get off of that and to get to a better situation and maybe even get better healthcare. That's the goal. So something like that is a good move towards better healthcare for people. Now, most people, as you know, will not do anything with that. They'll just go, I'm going to stay with Medicare, or I'm going to stay with Medicaid, I'm going to do nothing. But there will be early adopters. And as there are early adopters, people are going to say, wow, this actually works. I want in too. These are the types of policies I'm talking about that are about creating more options for people. Am I making sense or no? Yep. Correct. But that doesn't actually happen, though. And there are two reasons why that does not happen. The first one is, oh, oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Okay. Yes, it's true. Correct. Mhm. No worries. I want to go. The first part is the idea that we actually have control over this. We don't. And there are two reasons why we don't. Reason number one is in most cases when this happens, the people who run this are actually some form of board or commission. The boards or commissions are almost always selected by people that we have no way of deciding that they shouldn't be there or not unless they do something that's illegal or unethical or they get arrested or something like that. The boards and the commissions, those are the people who usually run these things. And then often they're the ones who make the rules and regulations. And then if the legislation doesn't say no, it tends to be the actual thing, right? That's what it is. It becomes law or rule based upon people who we don't vote on and we have nothing. That's what usually happens right now. But let me go to the next step. If you say, well, then, Larry, we'll just vote out the people who select these people. We don't do that either, right? Most incumbents, because of the way our system works with things like gerrymandering and red and blue districts, they keep getting elected again and again and again. I'm sure you know this. The stats are that as a general rule, we don't actually, the politicians aren't doing what we want as a general rule, right? Most of the others tend not to, right? So I'm not sure I buy the idea that we actually have any power, but we do have some power, not much, but more, I think, if there is a private sector, because we can decide to not go someplace. We have a chance of voting with our dollars or our feet, which again isn't great when you have people who are very powerful, but it gives us some power and some control. I think you see that with how things are moving now, even socially in our country. You see companies doing what is, trying to move the way that the country wants us to move. I do think you see that. Am I wrong with that? Oh, hold on. I can't hear you. Is that me again? I don't think this one is me. I can't hear you. Can you talk now? Oh, I hear you now. Yeah, now I hear you. Oh, sorry. So what I was saying is I don't think that we have actually much control over this. I think that we have, as I said, boards and such. They are the people who usually make this work. And when we try to vote people out, we tend not to. When it comes to things like voting locally, gerrymandering, red and blue districts, the people don't leave, right? We tend to not vote them out because we are afraid to the other to come in. Right? If we're in a red district, we're afraid of the blue. If we're in a blue district, we're afraid of the red. So we never bring the other person in. And the same rules keep popping up consistently. I think we do have some control when it is, voting with our dollars or voting with our feet. There is some control over that. Obviously, if you have more money, you have more control, but you will actually have some control. You can create a system to where we'll have some control versus none. But the second piece is I don't think, and I hope I wasn't implying that. I'm not saying doctors only do things for money at all. That's not what I'm saying. I think doctors do a lot for money and for prestige and for the idea of trying to help people and many other things, being professional, lots of things. But if you ask many doctors why they're leaving the field or why they're asking their children to not be doctors, it's not because you don't make enough money. That isn't the biggest issue. That is an issue, obviously, but it's also because of things like paperwork and such. To your point about would it be easier for paperwork if it was single payer? I think you're probably correct that it probably would be easier when it comes to admin. That's probably true. I just think the service level will be so much lower. I can't think of a time where monopoly service has been good. I mean, maybe it exists. I don't know enough about the world to know that that doesn't work. If that were true, why do we have FedEx and why do we have UPS and why would we have so much competition in the postal service? It's losing money, so I think financially that's not true. Its biggest customers are like FedEx and Amazon, so I think that's not true. I think many people aren't using it. I would not say that it's first of all, it's no longer a monopoly, right? It's a semi-monopoly, but it's not really a monopoly anymore. So I'm not sure I would count the post office as a monopoly. And even if I did, it's asked others to assist it in some way, shape, or form. So I don't think monopoly is a good idea. Now, when it comes to the idea of inequity, I'm not saying that we should get rid of the safety net. I'm not. I'm saying we have to provide other options. I don't want to knock down the Goliath. I want to build up more Davids. I think that's the biggest issue. And I'd rather work on building up more Davids. I'll give you another idea that may go ahead. That's true. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Um, yeah, I think, but that's my point. The post office isn't a monopoly. The post office has found the niche, right? The post office's niche really is what you just said, right? If you want to send a package to Barrow, Alaska, right? You're right. The odds of FedEx sending them a getting there are slim to none. In fact, the FedEx will probably give the package to the post office and pay them to deliver it. That's probably what will happen if FedEx had to deliver it to Barrow, Alaska. But by default, it's now not a monopoly, right? Because FedEx is there and UPS is there and now Amazon Prime is there. So it's not. And my point would be, it wasn't a monopoly, because if it was a monopoly, then there wouldn't be a FedEx or a UPS or an Amazon Prime. So I'm not sure the post office is a good example. Am I wrong on this? Sure. Correct. I'm not saying get rid of the post office. That's my point. I've never said get rid of the post office. I've never said get rid of Medicaid and Medicare. I think you want to have that. My point is, I want to have more than one option. I'm not against the post office existing and doing its job. I would be against you saying, which we don't right now, I would be against you saying, you know what? Only the post office can deliver packages. FedEx may not exist. UPS may not exist. Amazon Prime may not exist. That's my issue. And if we go single payer, that's what we're doing. We're saying other insurance companies may not exist. And that's my problem, because you know what? For some people, the post office is absolutely the answer. And for others, it's completely not. And if I want to give people the best option, let them have options. Yep. Can you give me an example of one thing you might be concerned about? Yep. No, I love the idea. What I talked about, again, I'm talking about policies now. What I spoke about in New York State, in New York, we spend about $28,000 to $29,000 per kid per year in New York State. It's embarrassingly high. It's the highest in the country. And usually, depending upon the year and who ranks us, we rank somewhere between 25 and 37th out of 50. So we tend to not rank well. Once in a while, we get up in the top 10, depending upon who ranks us, but it's very rare. Usually, we rank horribly. And when we rank so bad, we spend so much money, people just go, let's give people more money. Let's not support homeschooling. And New York State's very bad with homeschooling. So what I would like us to do is, again, provide more options. Same thing. How about instead of us tying our schools to property tax, which is what New York State does, instead it comes directly out of the state government, flat fee, whatever number of kids you have in your school district, multiply it by X, whatever the dollars are, write the check. What does that mean? That means by default, the money follows the kid. So the money follows the kid by default. If the kid goes to the school district, the district gets more money. The kid leaves the school district gets less money. More kids means more money. Everyone gets the same amount of money. Now, in reality, what happens in reality is the wealthier parents donate money and donate stuff and raise money, and the wealthier families wind up having better schooling in general. Anyway, there's almost no way of stopping that. It's probably going to happen. But not just that. If you also then supported homeschooling with some type of credit for people who wanted to homeschool, if you wanted to support private schools with something like that, but at the same time, still allow those kids who are homeschooled and private schooled, since the people are still paying taxes, to still join and go to the public schools. And what I mean by that is you could be homeschooled, but still be on the local chess team. Be homeschooled, still be on the football team. Be homeschooled, but still go to the class trip to Spain or whatever is the thing that you're doing. You do that, and now you're providing more options for people. Would someone who's wealthy have better schooling? Yeah. But as long as I'm allowing the kids who are poorer the same options, I'm okay with that. I think it's a better system now. Right now, the system is not working. You're seeing failures everywhere. You're seeing kids going to college not being prepared. For most kids who go to college now, the first year of college is 13th grade because they're not ready for it. They spent the last year of high school smoking weed, playing video games, and cutting class with study halls. And then it takes the average kid now 6 years to graduate college. And they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. One of the reasons why that is because so much of our schooling is controlled by the federal government via funding. So federal funds come in, schools do what the federal government says, or sometimes state governments even, but often federal governments. And so now their incentives are not the right incentives. Incentives are, can I put my kids into college, whether they should go to college or not? And can my kids pass a standardized test, whether my kids need to pass that test or not? And maybe they should be tradespeople, and maybe they should be going to college at age 18. This goes right back to my idea with healthcare. I want to provide more options, keeping the government option there. It's fine. If my ideas are correct, and I believe they are, then people will go to my ideas, and the government will do one of two things. It'll get better, or that system will go away, but the community will have been there to help people because people need help. If I'm wrong and my ideas are bad, people will stay with the government option. It's optional. I'm not forcing anybody to do anything, and I'm not getting rid of the government option. So the people over time decide that I'm right or that I'm wrong. Either way, no one is left out in the cold. I would rather it come out of the general fund. That's what I would rather it be. Sadly, in the case of New York, it was supposed to come out of our lottery. That went right to the general fund, and we stopped paying for it. I would rather us not use property taxes at all to pay for schooling. That would be my preferred choice. Right. Why would they have to? Right? It doesn't matter. The amount of money that goes to your school is based on the bodies. That's all it would matter. So if you have a lot of kids in that school, yep. If I don't have federal or state mandates on things like that, let the school grow if it can grow. If the school wants to grow, it would grow. If it doesn't want to grow, it won't. It'll decide what it wants to do. Why would I stop that? Why would I decide that? There are two things in this case, I think, and this is going to make most people who like more of a socialized world, they might like this. You look at the Swedish model, right, as an example. They don't district their kids really. It's go to whatever school you want to go to, right? If you want to drive your kid 2 hours to a school, okay, go ahead. So what should happen, and I would hope it would, and I think you see this in certain areas now, is that when schools see there is a group of people who will come to their school, which will get them more money, they'll create busing. They'll create ways of getting the kids to the school. They don't, because they want more funds for their school, so they'll get more funding. I think it will work out relatively well. But again, if it doesn't, then we can make moves and shifts at that point. Right now, it's failing. I don't want to measure my ideas against perfection. It's not going to work. I want to measure my ideas against status quo. Status quo is not working. And all I hear from the right is school choice. All I hear from the left is more money. I can't see either of those working. Yep. I would agree. In theory, I agree with what you're saying. The reality of it is Americans aren't going to do that. We don't want to. Our culture says no, right? And people get mad at me when I talk about culture. Culture is what gets people to say yes, right? Culture is what gets people to vote for the right people. Culture is what makes people actually make changes in their life. When we hear single payer, you just hear Americans scream. You hear Americans get upset. Americans can't even, they go nuts, right? It's, oh my God. So we're nowhere near doing that. I would like us to move to a level to where people feel comfortable enough to make a step, right? I want an idea that is radical enough to make actual change and to make people excited, but at the same time, familiar enough to where Americans go, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Single payer is not that. Yes. It's a good question, and I think it's just what I feel is you have corporate capitalism right now, crony capitalism right now, where large organizations and old and hold on one second. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sadly with my audio, my people that I'm doing live can't hear you. I apologize. I don't know why that's happening. Let me see if I can fix it real fast. Hold on one second.
No problem.
Hold on. Let me see if I can fix that real fast. See if that is possible. Hold on.
Do you know what you're broadcasting with? What software?
No. All right. It's not going to work. There we go. And we're good. All right. Can you speak again? There we go. I'm hoping they can hear you now. I don't know if they can. If we can't, sorry guys. We'll just you can always head over to you can always head to Destiny's YouTube. I'm sorry guys. You can always head over to Destiny's YouTube and watch it there. I apologize if my audio isn't working for you. But let me go back to the other piece if I could. I feel like with crony capitalism, the idea of us having actual change is slim to none without starting at a more localized state level. And why do I say that? We have tried so many times to make changes. We've tried with, we're going to change our funding of elections. That hasn't worked. We're going to try changing how we deal with banking. That hasn't worked. We're going to try to make it, better for public companies. That hasn't worked. Almost every time we try to create these regulations at the federal level, these regulations are written literally by corporate lobbyists, and the corporate lobbyists write rules that they can get around, and they constantly do it. I really think this has to begin at a local, county, or state level for it to make the next step. And maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm happy to be wrong if I am, but I have not seen anything at the federal level actually do anything near what it was trying to do. We've been trying to, somehow make it safer and better in theory, right? With public companies. That hasn't worked at all. We've been trying to get money out of politics in theory. That hasn't worked at all. We've been passing laws in theory. Credit, that isn't working, right? None of these things are working at the federal level. So I think at a local level is where you begin to test them, make them work. If people see value, then we bring it up from the local level to the federal level. Yep. That's true. Absolutely. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true. I didn't say they weren't successful. Please, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not. Look, I know a lot of libertarians talk constantly about get rid of this, get rid of that, get rid of this, get rid of that. It's not what I've ever brought up. I've talked about poverty. I did a presentation on Queens College on poverty, and I try to show better ways of making of alleviating poverty without a war on poverty, without a war on drugs, without government stepping in and giving out money. I've come up with ideas for that. I've literally spoken about that more than once. This is the I on my Sharpe YouTube page. I literally have a link that's it's cheesy, but I'm a dad, so it's a dad joke. I said, can't feel the burn. Maybe it's not sharp enough. And it's literally me going down Bernie Sanders' policy page and giving libertarian ideas to achieve the same things that people who like Bernie want. That's what I'm trying to achieve. I think we can do it this way because I think it will begin to actually move the ball forward. I do not see at all it happening any other way. What I see happening, if you look at what's happening now, is the left is going deeper left, the right is going deeper right. Nothing is getting changed. The left has become the party of one side of a culture war, and the right the other side of a culture war, and nothing is getting fixed. I'm trying to actually get things done, and while my ideas are not perfect, they coming up with an odd or different idea actually is something that will make people think. People are still excited, and I crossed New York State. And I didn't do anywhere near as well as I wanted to do when I ran, but I did far better than anyone else who'd ever run in New York State and Libertarian Party by far. I did far better than anyone else had done. And one of the reasons was I had interesting ideas like regulating cannabis like onions, right? Things like that made people think, oh, that's radical enough to be different, but I still understand it. This is what I'm trying to achieve. The idea of anything that's single payer, or monopoly. I don't want to replace one monopoly with another. We already have cartel systems everywhere. We have cartel systems in almost everything we do. I want more Davids, less Goliaths. I don't see any party or group doing that. I only see libertarians even caring about that. Sure, I'll walk down that road right now. Right, what legalizing cannabis in most states has done is still ensure that there is a black market in cannabis. Right, that's what I'm trying to avoid. General rule that my team and I put together when we started talking about cannabis. The way we've legalized it, we've ensured that there is still a black market. Just because a state legalizes it doesn't mean they legalize it in a way that makes the black market go away. And what I want to do is I want to try to do my best to end the black market, right? That's what I want to try to do. To the best of my ability, I want to try to end the black market. Generally speaking, the harder your licensing is, the more restrictions you put on people who are felons being part of the industry, the higher you tax it, the more you create a black market. You know, in New York State, for a medical marijuana license, you had to have $210,000 to distribute. Oh my God. How are you going to find that kind of money? You know what winds up happening? Wealthy people wind up having either hedge funds or they wind up having some kind of holding company, and they start doing it. And the local farmer gets screwed and the local dealer gets screwed. The local dealer, it just stays as a dealer. He doesn't do anything. So you want to make sure when you legalize it, well, I said regular like onions, because if you want to grow onions in your backyard, you can go ahead and grow onions in your backyard. If you're poor or you don't have that much money and you would rather grow your medicine for your chronic back pain or whatever issue you have for your medicine or your PTSD, grow in your backyard if you want to. If you don't, you can buy it cheaply from your dealer, right? My idea was if you like your dealer, keep your dealer. Why not? If you make it to where the only thing you have to do is become legal, all your dealer has to do now is, spend $45 or whatever it is in your state to become an LLC, and he or she can keep dealing. That's a good thing. Now they can get insurance, E&O. They don't have to carry a stick or a gun around. They can actually call the cops if someone robs them. All of a sudden, it becomes a legalized market. You don't need street justice. None of that's required anymore. I don't need to have attack dogs in my house. None of that stuff's required anymore. But when you start to do it the way they did with so much money, those guys stay illegal. And the price becomes so expensive, people still buy it illegally. So you retain a black market. So you're right in that many states are legalizing it, but they're legalizing it so that the cronies can get their cut. So that big business still gets all their money and the little guy is still cut out. I would rather have it to where it's a cash crop for small farmers. And the example I'll give you is in New York State, we allowed some regulations to be removed on breweries. And in New York State, we had a big explosion in local small breweries in New York State. Entrepreneurs stepped up. People started doing that. And I want us to have, cash local grows, right? Have that same thing. I think that's the way to legalize or to decriminalize cannabis. The way we're doing it now is not a good idea. It retains a black market. Yeah, maybe you make it 18 years or older. That's fine. What else? Look, yes, but if you just did 18 years or older as an example, the black market would be minuscule. It would just be the people who want to sell to kids. That would be it. That's your only black market at that point. Well, that's still a terrible black market, but if I'm going to send my police force into people's homes or neighborhoods, I'd rather send them in to stop it getting sold to kids. If I'm going to use them for that, use them for that. That's a good reason to use cops, to stop kids from getting drugs. I'm okay with that, right? Use them for that. But I don't want to use them to not kick in your door because they don't like the number of plants you have in your house. In New York State, I think you only can have 3 plants. If you have more than 3 plants, they can kick in your door. And they don't even have to have a warrant in New York State for that. That's how we're regulating it now. We're creating an office of cannabis management because it's so critical to regulate cannabis. Why? In the black market that cannabis is in now and has been for centuries, we don't have any deaths due to cannabis. So now that it's legalized, we require a board. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of stuff we're doing in all states. There's no requirement for a board. There's no requirement for this. Is there an onion board that stops you from selling onions? Of course not. Now you're saying, Larry, I might want quality control. Great, you have quality control with any food or product that people put into their bodies. Keep the same quality control for that, and all of a sudden now what begins to happen is people will still be able to win. The little guy can win. I want the little guy to win. I want the local community to be able to win. And with the way we're doing it now, it's not happening. All those people in Colorado there was a big homeless boom in Colorado when they legalized cannabis, because so many of the people who were in other states, they believed, sadly, that they can go to Colorado and get into that industry. Many of them had criminal records, and they thought they can go in there, work in the industry, get their life turned around, get a second chance at life. And what did the government do? They said, no, you had to be here a year. You got to pay the fees. So they got there and they had nothing. And they went to the black market. They became homeless, all kind of problems. Now, that isn't the only reason they had a homeless problem, but that was a big chunk of it. So you don't talk about policies? Yeah, that's the policy I want. I don't want big government involved in something like that. I want the little guy to win. And what I would argue is every time we start to regulate something like that, by default, we become crony capitalists. By default, we start helping out the big guys. And by default, regulatory capture becomes the norm. Why do you think that's never going to happen? And that's my entire point. You create many niche industries. That's exactly my point. Yes. Well, not anymore, it isn't, but it could have been. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And what I would say is look right now, and again, I'll go back to New York, our brewery industry. There are many huge brewers, right? I mean, huge. Anheuser-Busch is massive, right? I don't know who makes Coors Light, so massive. It's huge. I don't even know the company that does it, but they're massive. Yet somehow the industry began to explode. Wine, it's a niche industry. Lots of local people have, wine, and they're able to make good money and explode. So I do think there are many examples of little guy growing and getting bigger and badder and people jumping into those fields. I think you absolutely can do it if you have the right environment. Look, I grew up in a poor neighborhood in the Bronx. And I remember when I was a kid in the Bronx growing up, most of the people, I grew up in the 70s. And when I grew up in the 70s in the Bronx, I remember kids and people making money as entrepreneurs constantly. I remember them braiding hair on the sidewalk to make money. And right now in New York State, you want to braid hair, you have to get a license for that. It'll cost you $20,000 to braid hair. I'm not joking. If you walk a dog in New York City, you require a license to walk a dog. That's the types of things that I keep talking about. That's what crushes the little guy. Those are the things. These are all ideas that are, oh, it's about safety. It's not about safety. Who are the people dying from hair braiding? Nobody is. It's a fantasy. That is just more regulatory capture by large businesses who keep doing that. If you have a government that says, where's the harm? There's no harm. Stop. But we don't have that. Our government is like, oh, let's keep doing this. And my point is you have to make an idea to where you have to have an ideology that says, let's just let people be people. And we don't have that. That's how the little guy begins to explode. Yes. Yep. Oh, no, you have to. No one else says that but libertarians, my friend. There's not a Democrat or Republican that I hear in my state saying what I just said. So in my state, you got to be libertarian. Yes. Yes. Yep. 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 Yes.
What I would consider a fantasy of this idea that like we can do things to help small business owners, and we can do things to help the small guy be able to compete and blah blah blah. And it's like I don't think that just can't happen. It's never going to be the case except in very niche industries like maybe craft beer, which I'm willing to bet after the coronavirus and everything, I'm willing to bet that a lot of these breweries are probably having a lot of problems in New York right now, and probably don't have the capital in hand to sustain themselves through the corona.
So are you saying then that there's no hope? Is that what you're saying? Don't bother trying to stop the behemoth. Don't bother trying to stop the Leviathan. Just allow them to run roughshod because we have no chance. I don't. Yes, but yep. Well, look, all the big businesses at one point were small businesses. So clearly they all became great. If you go back, say, 30 years as an example, I'm not sure exactly, but in an area, all the top companies that are top companies now weren't. Many of them didn't even exist 30 years ago. Probably most of them 40 years didn't exist at all, but they were at least small, if not that. So I don't think that's true. What I'd like to do is create a cycle to where big businesses grow and collapse and small businesses come up. And that's a normal cycle that we should do. That's what I want to foster more than anything. And sadly, I feel we're moving to a point to where right now, if you look at financing, for example, or brand new businesses as an example, in most cases, you find so many people starting businesses with only one goal: to be, yes, to be bought. Yes, to be bought. And most of that happens because once you start to get bigger, it becomes harder. One of the rules I wanted to put in play in New York State was, which is similar to one in Wyoming. Wyoming, if not mistaken, is for farmers. If I got it right, it may have changed, but when I was running, it was true. If you were a farmer in Wyoming and you agreed that you would sell only to within Wyoming, you were immune from all federal regulatory bodies, right? Once you decided to sell outside of Wyoming, you then had to of course, abide by federal regulatory bodies. So I think in New York State, as I mentioned, we should have that for any small business that agrees that will sell only within New York State. You're immune from any federal regulatory bodies. That gives you an advantage, number one. But two, some people will decide, you know what? I like staying small. I don't want to become that big guy ever. I'm happy being that local guy who just services your lawnmowers or sells you, your meat and potatoes or whatever is the thing that matters, right? They're going to be happy to just do that. So you do that, you encourage people to be local, right? You're going to encourage that. And the small people can still survive. Go to most small towns in America today. Most of them they have one big thing, like they have a college or a prison or a factory. They have one big thing in the town, and then everything else is some form of franchise. Some form of franchise, whether it's a gas station, a fast food joint, whatever. It's an H&R Block. It's some form of franchise. Why are they so popular in America? Now, I'm not against franchises. In many cases, they're very valuable for people who want to grow a small business, particularly those who like some kind of structure. It's not a bad idea, but they're everywhere because franchises are basically big business. They have the massive lobbyists, they have the lawyers, they have the HR, they have all the things required. The little guys simply can't compete with. They can buy in bulk, as you mentioned earlier. They can do all of those things, right? The issue that I want to do is I want to make it to where the competition is from the local person. Some people will stay small. Some will be able to prep themselves to grow bigger. I would rather that be the case. I think we do see them come up and then they get smashed down. I think we see them come up and then they get smashed down. That's the problem. They do come up. Lots of people start new businesses. But I don't know if you know this, but last time I checked, this is probably in the area of around 2012-ish or so. And this tends to be pretty similar. About 80% of all small businesses collapse within 5 years. And then another 80% of those collapse another 5 years. So generally speaking, small businesses fail. Those numbers are higher than ever now. Why? Because it's so hard. It's hard to I tease people when people start businesses here in New York State and they go, hey, Larry, I'm going to hire somebody now. And I say, awesome. That's great. You can hire somebody. Now the punishment begins. And the government begins to punish you immediately. The government does not support the gig economy, which is the way many people are going to start making a living in the future. And people are going to change the way they work. The average person in America, if you're a youngster, you're say 20 or in that area, you're probably going to have 5 different careers in your life. 5 different careers, not jobs, careers. How are you going to learn a different career? Odds are the gig economy. You're going to do some jobs here or there, learn something new, change and shift. You might go back to school, but probably not. But you might go back to school nowadays. That kind of thing is possible. But the odds are you're not going to. Government goes out of its way to crush that. So again, the little guy can't get up and running, right? You have to, as I just said, if you want to walk a dog in New York City, you've got to have a license. Braid hair, you got to have a license, right? And that's a common thing. That's crushing small businesses. Of course it is. You get it. This is what happens, and I'm assuming it happens in your state too, but I could be wrong. Once you hire an employee, immediately New York State assumes that you were a bad person and begins to write you notes that you owe them money. I'm not joking. Ask anyone who started a business. You get a bill. You owe us money. You owe us money. Now, if you're savvy, you have an accountant, and the accountant takes that and goes, "Don't worry about it. This is New York State. New York State assumes you're guilty. I got you. Don't worry about it." But if you're not savvy, you begin to negotiate with the state, and the state will negotiate with you, even though you don't actually owe the money. Once you say you owe the money, the state will go, "Oh, good. You agree you owe the money? Great," and they'll start to negotiate with you. So now you're writing a check for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 that you didn't have in the first place. That doesn't happen with big business. They'll say things like, "Well, you are working in the business, therefore you owe workers' comp, and you don't if you are a sole proprietor. You don't. It's just not true." But they'll say that. You'll get a note for that. You'll get a note saying that you owe money for either workers' comp or for unemployment insurance, whether or not you have full-time or part-time employees. And you only owe if you have full-time employees, but they'll still send it anyway. The note will come regardless. The second you put your EIN, which is, for those of you who don't know, that's your number that says you're a business. You're basically the equivalent of your business social security number. Once you send it out, they come out right after you. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about that small businesses get hammered with. What they'll do is they'll create a regulation, and the regulation will say, okay, if you do something, whatever the bad thing is, then the fine is $10,000. And they'll say, well, the fine's $10,000 because there's a possibility of harm. So we should punish these businesses and they should pay $10,000. Well, what winds up actually happening? The rule or regulation isn't really an important regulation anyway. It'll be something like, and I'm just giving this up as an example. You know, when your burgers are on the counter being ready to be fried, they have to be at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a type of regulation there is. I don't know if that's the actual number, but there is regulation like that. So now yours is at 42. That's a several $1,000 fine. Well, what does McDonald's or some large corporation do? They collect all their fines at the end of the year. They then go to the city and negotiate. Hey, we owe you $4 million in fines. We'll pay you $1 million. Be quiet. The city goes, great, thanks. Takes $1 million, walks away. That's what happens if you're a franchise or a large organization. If you're a small organization, they say, give us $10,000. If you don't, we're going to shut you down. So the small guy gets killed. Well, the franchise doesn't. If New York City, if you see the UPS truck drivers and such, they get tickets all the time. You'll see sometimes 2, 3, 4 tickets. What do? At the end of the year, they negotiate with New York City and write them a check. But what if you're a local guy, an owner operator? You get 2 or 3 tickets, you're screwed. That's how that works again and again and again. I would like that to not be the case. Leave people alone. Sure. No, what I want is the rule to be, if you harm somebody, you have to pay. Not whether the hamburger's at 40 degrees or not. Did you harm somebody? Did someone get sick? Did someone complain? Did somebody die? Did something bad happen? You see large corporations, they will literally do stuff that people will die. They'll be killed. And they will say, we admit no wrongdoing. Why? Because they followed the regulations that their corporate lobbyists wrote. So since they followed the regulations, they say, I've done no harm. So they pay some fee to some lawyers in a class action lawsuit. The people who got hurt 7 years later get $4.92. The lawyers make $1 bazillion, and they say, I've done no harm because I followed the rules. Because the crime is not against the individual, the crime is against the state. I would rather it be, if you have a burger joint and you give someone food poisoning, you owe them. That's assault. That's a problem. Pay them. Fix this. Don't pay the state, because what happens is now enforcement is a profit center. I don't want enforcement to be a profit center. Enforcement should be for safety, not as a profit center. So now you have many organizations. You probably heard this if you know people who have restaurants. The second the health inspector comes in, they simply throw all the food in the garbage. I'm not joking. They take all the food, throw it in the garbage, because it's cheaper to rebuy the food than to pay the fines that he will find by default. And it's the thing they also do here. Small business owner has to try to survive. The health inspector comes in. I'm not making this up. It's a story I heard more than once. They drop several $100s on the floor, meaning the owner, and he picks it up and he asks a question. He says, I'm sorry, I just found this on the floor. Is this yours? If the inspector says yes, he leaves. If it says no, he stays. You're increasing corruption. You're encouraging corruption. You're encouraging pain, and you're attacking little guys. There's no tomorrow. This is my problem. I want to make it to where if you hurt someone, pay for them. You hurt them. I don't want the crime to be against the state. I don't want enforcement to be a profit center, because what winds up happening is now the state becomes predatory. What happened during COVID, the state made a bunch of rules for COVID, and they were random. And this happened all over the country. If you're a bar, you have to close here, or have this percentage, or do this thing, whatever the thing was, and it would change literally every month. But not just that. They will now send their agents out to now collect and now attack bars and clubs that were already getting destroyed, restaurants that were already being crushed. So the county saw this and said, whoa, you guys are coming in and you're robbing our people. We don't like that. You can't rob our people. We rob our people. And then they created their own rules and regulations at the county level. And then those rules and regulations did not match at all. So now a local bar or restaurant has an option. Do I let the county rob me or do I let the state rob me? Which one? Because I can't follow both. And that was happening constantly to where people just said, I'm going to shut down. I can't handle this. And again, this goes back to the same thing. The state becomes predatory. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a valid point. So what I would say is, instead of saying, I would turn regulations instead to guidelines. So you want to have guidelines, right? I don't. You might want to say, look, your hamburger should be at 40 degrees or whatever the case may be. We recommend this is what the government says, so we should do. And then require the businesses to hold insurance. You require them. That's a requirement. Do you have enough insurance that if you do something stupid, that you can deal with that issue? Two things will happen. Number one, insurance companies will eventually do some type of inspection, which is fine. I don't mind that at all. The insurance companies will, of course, do that because they don't want to pay out when people do dumb things. The second thing you would do is, once you have the insurance company doing inspections, when the insurance company starts paying out, they may even have their own rules and regulations that if you want to get insured, you have to do this and do that. And if people don't do the things, then they can't get insured. And if they can't get insured, then they can't have a restaurant. So the insurance companies would literally wind up shutting down the restaurants by default because they can't get insured. No, we have a problem still. It isn't the perfect system, but the difference is it's in the insurance company's best interest to make sure that he doesn't crush that business because he wants the business to stay and keep paying premiums. So it has a better incentive. But the bureaucrat, no, not at all. Nope. If that were true, we wouldn't have shut our entire state down for COVID. Absolutely not true. No way. The individual the individual bureaucrat is incentivized by collecting cash. The individual bureaucrat that is predatory is a profit center. They must collect money from the people and the businesses. That's their goal, and they are judged often monthly, if not quarterly. Often, for sure, yearly, but very often monthly or quarterly. No, but no, the insurance would be the opposite. If anything, the insurance company would be more lenient, and that might be a problem, right? The insurance company might be more lenient because the insurance company is going to make its money based upon premiums. It's not going to make its money based upon fines and fees. So the individual bureaucrat, you're right. They don't say, "Oh, guys, you know what? Because you brought in $100, here's an extra 20 in your pocket." Of course not. But if you're a bureaucrat and your job as an inspector is to go out and to collect cash, if you don't collect a certain amount of cash, I am going to pressure you. And what example do I have of this? Look at all the sting operations that local liquor authorities, state liquor authorities use. They're creating problems where there is none. And ask anyone who's a bar owner who you might know, and you'll sure have either seen or heard or actually watched something like this where 3 people come in a bar. True story I heard, and somebody else was there. So unless both were lying to me. So I believe it's true because 2 people both corroborated it. So 3 people come into a bar. The bartender does his job. He asks for ID. The young lady shows her ID, and the 2 men show their ID. The young lady is not of age. She's only 20, not 21. The bartender says, I'm sorry, I can't let you drink the beer. I apologize. I can't do it. It's against the law. She goes, okay, I won't drink it. Can I just pay for these 2 guys? He goes, fine. He gives 2 guys the beer. He's fined because the rule is she can't purchase it. That's the law. That's fair? It is. No, it's the law and it's bogus. Why would they? There's no crime. Who was harmed by that? The 3 people who were there were all state agents. No one, the woman who was under 21 didn't drink the beer. So no one was harmed. This was a sting operation to punish the bar because they were trying to collect money. Are you telling me that in this, if this was real, yep. No, I think they should. No, that to me is obvious harm. I'm not. What's like the example would be, what if someone had a firearm, they had it loaded, finger and trigger, and were flashing it around in a bar? I think that's a line I don't want to cross. Now, is that gray? You're right. It's a gray area, and we have to draw a line somewhere. In my view, and some people disagree. There are libertarians who disagree with me completely on this. But in my view, this is an obvious problem. You're out there with a car and you're drunk. You are a threat. This is threatening. You're threatening other people. That's my view. Many libertarians disagree with me, but I'm on your side. I think, yes, of course, that's a problem. I lost your sound again. Is this me? Or is this you? Your sound just went away all of a sudden. I didn't do anything differently. I don't think that was me. Let me see what I can do here. Are you there? Let me try one more, see if I can get you in and get you out again. See if that'll work. I can't hear you. This is super frustrating, guys. I apologize. How about now? Still no. I don't know what I've done. I don't know if it's me or if it's you. You all of a sudden went out. I seem to hear everything except for you. All right. There we go. There we go. Now I got you. Yep, now I got you. I don't know what I did. Now I got you all of a sudden.
And disconnecting from your computer, and every time it connects, Discord is sending all the audio there. That's my guess.
That makes sense. That absolutely does make sense. Yep, that makes sense. I think you are correct.
Okay, gotcha. That's usually what's happening.
Let me see if I can fix that. There we go. Okay. All right. I think we're good.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess in terms of like the drunk driving thing, so we would say that like even if you don't get into an accident, you ought to be punished for drunk driving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it sounds like for the 21-year-old, 20-year-old thing, the issue that you had there wasn't their way of enforcing that kind of law or fine. You just think that that particular law is dumb then, right? It's not really the enforcement part you have a problem with there. It's that
no. The
no?
way it's enforced, right? In this case, the incentive for the State Liquor Association, the incentive is for them to go and collect. That's their incentive. So they create a sting operation where there is no one who's actually harmed. Again, the three people there are all state agents, right? The woman's actually over 21. She has a fake ID to try to fool the guy.
Well, do we think that like
she doesn't drink anyway?
Yeah, are sting operations always bad then?
Not always. If they're a sting operation because there is an actual person, right? If say they believed because someone said that this guy or gal was serving people underage, then maybe you have a state agent come in and see someone who's younger and literally just stay there and watch and see, does he do it? Does he not do it? Check her ID. There's actual harm. Punish the guy. Absolutely. 100%.
Well, but I mean,
my point is three was state agents.
I don't understand what the problem is with that. It seems like this is like standard practice, even in private industry, you test people like this. So I have a little bit of food background. I don't know if this term is ubiquitous throughout the industry, but we used to call them secret shoppers.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So you have like a random guy comes in. Usually it's like I think it's usually like a third party that's hired by the corporation. They come in and they have like an experience in your restaurant, and then they kind of like evaluate you based on what happens. I mean, that just seems pretty standard practice across like everything.
I've done it myself. I have been that person. I've done it for other industries where I act as a consultant. I would come as a consultant. I'm the secret shopper, if that makes any sense. I would do it, of course. But that sting operation is done internally, meaning the companies want it to be done. They're not going to punish me. I mean, they're not going to all of a sudden get shut down or fined. They're now going to fix their own internal policies because they want to be better. That's a whole different way of saying I'm going to be predatory and come after your business.
Well, but the reason why we have to have those restrictions is because companies aren't going to be incentivized to the more moral action here. So for instance, like if you have a bar it would be nice if you could sell to people that are under 21. It's
It
more
would be nice. I agree. It'd be nice.
So they're incentivized to do something that might not be like in the best interest of the public health, right? We could talk about like the coronavirus related lockdowns as well, like where it's kind of bad for business, but the incentive there isn't supposed to be for making money. It's supposed to be for some other thing that we're serving. So it would seem like having these sting operations to enforce rules or regulations, I think in general would be good. I think it feels to me, maybe we're just not connecting here. Like I would only get upset if these sting operations were done against things that I consider to be like stupid laws. So for instance, like I disagree with a lot of like speed limit related stuff in the US. And it seems like 95% of drivers do. That's why, you know, it's like, oh, like the first thing you ask anytime you're on a new freeway or a new highway is you're like, okay, how much can I speed here without them pulling me over? You know,
right? Sure.
If you are 60, you can go 70, 75 maybe. But like, yeah. So like when you've got like speed traps set up that are writing people tickets for going, you know, 60 and 55, it's like, okay, well, this is dumb. But it's not because the officer's running a speed trap. It's because we consider like this type of like law is dumb. So like if there is a speed trap that was set up and they were only ticketing people that were going like 100 and like a 65 or something, it's like, okay, well, are you really going to complain at that point? So yeah, I feel like the idea of having like a body that exists just to search for people that are violating certain regulations, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. And then setting up sting operations just to test people to make sure, like, are you guys following the, you know, restrictions? Like, seems like it wouldn't necessarily be bad either. You know, when you bring up this sting operation in the bar where, you know, it's a girl and she's got two guys like, hey, I want to buy alcohol for these two guys. And the guy's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll sell it to you. Like, that could have just as easily been like a normal 20-year-old and she's got like two 21-year-old friends in the back. She's like, hey, can I buy drinks for those guys? Like, it's not for me, it's for them. And then she goes back and they drink and then they all start drinking. And, you know, in a bar, you're probably not watching every single customer all the time. Like, I don't know. It feels that feels like a fair catch to me. I don't know if you can complain about that.
Maybe that one is fair. I don't think it was, but I think you could argue that might be. You could argue that it's fair. Sure. Okay. You could argue that it's fair. But whether it's fair or not, the incentive is for them to be predatory against small businesses. That's the issue that I have, right? Are you saying, well, Larry, don't you want to, you know, enforce? I do. So then how about instead you judge the people, you judge the liquor authority by how safe a given area is. You know, how much drunk driving do you have, or how many people are complaining, or how many times you find a youngster getting arrested for intoxication or something like that. That would be the right incentive, not cash. Once we turn in any way, shape, or form law enforcement into a profit center, it will by default become predatory. That's my biggest issue.
I mean, what's the alternative though? Like slavery? Like, do we like make okay, like now you have to come and work for the state for 2 years, or is it like penance?
No,
like you've
not
got to
at
go
all.
Well, like how else do we structure fines? Like, I mean, what? Like, it seems like a fine has to be like $1.
You could keep the fines. I'm talking incentivized. I'll give you an example when it comes to the police force, right? Most police forces are given accolades. My father was in law enforcement and many friends who were. Most of them given accolades by, you know, a number of arrests. How often are people arrested, right? Oh, good arrests, good collars, arrests, things of that sort. Or ticketing, if that's the case, right? They're judged by that. It's very rare that you actually have quotas. That's very rare in police forces. But in reality, they have unwritten rules, right? So if you're a cop, Destiny, and you made 12 busts this month and I only made 8, they don't say, Larry, your quota is 10. They go, look, Destiny did 12. Larry, what are you doing? What are you doing, Larry? What's going on? And all of a sudden now I better go make some arrests now. That's a common problem you find. But what if you were instead, the cops were incentivized by people being and feeling safe in their neighborhoods, right? So if the people feel safe or are happy, you're a good cop. Not did you arrest enough of them or bust enough of them or decide that you wanted, you know, to collect enough money through civil asset forfeiture. Civil asset forfeiture is the epitome of this, and that's what it really is, right? That's the paragon, maybe it's a better word. It's the paragon of this. It is exactly what people have searched for. How can I go out there and hunt and get money? And when you do that, go ahead.
So civil asset forfeiture, I think everybody agrees that that's horrible.
Not at all. There's lots of people who love it and they jump on it all day long. I see it all the time. No,
there might be some people that love it, but I heard people like John Oliver had a huge segment on his show. I'm pretty sure Trevor Noah on the Daily Show has talked about it. Like civil asset forfeiture seems like one of those things that I feel like I hear people even in the mainstream will come out and talk about how dumb it is.
So then why don't we stop it?
What?
Why don't we stop it?
If I had to guess, I would say that civil asset forfeiture policies are probably dictated by local police enforcement. And if I had to guess, most of these issues are going to come down to local elections, and the types of people that vote in local elections don't really care about civil asset forfeiture because their assets aren't being forfeited civilly.
Yes, this goes back to my first piece of us having no control that I talked about an hour ago.
We have a great deal
example of that.
Well, we have a lot of control. We just don't exercise it because people don't vote.
But it's the same thing. That's what happens. That's how it works, right? The people who are affected by civil asset forfeiture are people in poor neighborhoods who don't have access to lawyers, who often are immigrants, who often are afraid of cops because they've been arrested more than once. They have a criminal record, so they go there and they hunt in brown and black and poor neighborhoods. That's what happens all the time. So yeah, to your point, everyone says civil asset forfeiture is bad, but they don't do anything. Nothing changes. That's my point. Civil asset forfeiture is without question unconstitutional, but doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. There's no way someone go, oh yeah, totally constitutional. Just take people's stuff when they're not accused of a crime, when they're not charged with a crime, when they're not convicted. There's no way that's constitutional. But we do it. But we do it, and it doesn't change. And mandatory minimums, clearly not constitutional. Clearly not. And we do it. We keep doing it. So I don't think we have control of these things at all. We have to change incentivize. We have to change how we incentivize everybody. Incentivizing is everything. It isn't always money. It sounds like money, but it isn't always money.
There are a lot of issues, especially on local levels, that don't get the attention for a variety of reasons. The right types of people don't vote to ever change these things. I agree with that. I guess, like I kind of had said before, like I agree that these things are problems. These solutions don't feel like they would fix these problems. So for instance, when we talk about like incentivize, we need to incentivize these things differently. Enforcement bodies should be incentivized to find people that need to be enforced on. That's the reason why they exist, right? Like if the FBI exists, like I want the FBI to be incentivized to finding people that are committing federal crimes. Or if local police departments exist, I want them to be incentivized to find people that are breaking like local laws and ordinances. Like that's what they should be doing. Like we need to incentivize them and empower them to do that. Now, and I feel like sometimes we're getting our wires crossed on this, or maybe that's just the impression I'm getting. I don't think that there's a problem incentivizing law enforcement to find people that are breaking laws. I think the problem sometimes is that we just don't agree with some of the laws that exist. Like even civil asset forfeiture isn't necessarily a bad idea in concept, because I think that the concept of civil asset forfeiture is just that if there is a particular civil asset that's being used in the forfeiture of a crime, that the state has an authority to seize that asset. So for instance, let's say that you break into somebody's house and the house is being used as a meth lab, right? That maybe the state has some authority over, taking part of the property or stuff going on in there. Or if you've got like a car that's like specially decked out to like run drugs or whatever, like maybe there are arguments there. But there's no
arguments there. Sorry, there's no arguments there. If the person is not at a minimum arrested, at a minimum indicted, maybe. But we take it when they're not even accused, not arrested, not indicted. If you at least went to if they're indicted, maybe I could see, right? Now we can have a conversation. But civil asset forfeiture, the person doesn't even have to be indicted. At a minimum, indicted. At a minimum.
Sure. Yeah.
At a minimum.
So here's like the analogy that I'll draw that is hard. I'm already gonna know your answer to this, but like, how do you feel, for instance, about like no-fly lists?
Terrible idea for many reasons. Number one, there's no due process. Number two, the incentive is the same as I talked about before. What's the incentive for me? I'm a bureaucrat and I create a no-fly list. And what's my incentive? To put everybody possible on that list, because if one person gets through and does something bad, I'm fired. So when I'm not sure, you're going to list. And not just that, here's what actually happens. Once you're on the list and you then say, hey, Mr. Bureaucrat Larry Sharpe, I shouldn't be on the list. They go, I'm not talking to you. You're on the list. I'm not joking. That literally happens. So there's no due process to get off the list. And you get on the list based upon suspicion. You are being punished based upon suspicion, not based upon a conviction. I would buy a conviction again, at a minimum an indictment. But a conviction, okay, you're indicted, fine. But so that's the more. But number two on a no-fly list. Why in the world, how does a no-fly list actually work? Does all of a sudden now terrorists are no longer terrorists? Of course they are. They just find other ways of getting around. what winds up happening with all these laws is that the good people get punished and the bad people find other ways of doing stuff. That's what happens, right? We have all these know your customer laws for banks because we're afraid that all of a sudden, you know, the terrorists are going to use banks. Well, first off, the big banks launder money. UBS did it more than once. Like, you can check it to Google search. UBS was convicted more than once of money laundering for drug cartels. So they do it anyway. So those laws are useless. But not just that this little guy doesn't use that bank anymore. He finds other ways of moving his money. And he does that. So who actually gets punished by a KYC law? You and I trying to open up a bank account, you know, to start a new business. We get punished and we get harassed and we get hassled, and we're not the bad guy. The no-fly list. Who's going to do 9/11 now? Nobody. We're worried about 9/11? Stop. That's not going to happen. Any guy gets up on a plane and goes, I'm taking a plane and I'm going to whatever. That guy is getting beaten to death on that flight within the next 5 minutes. There's going to be no 9/11 in my lifetime again. So we've got a no-fly list for no reason. All it does is punish people for no reason at all. Bad guys just take the bus or something. It's silly.
Do we, like, is this kind of like a, could we generalize this argument as an argument against kind of like all forms of like regulations or laws? And do you believe that, like,
not at all.
Most? No, okay.
No. No, I'm all about incentivizing. How do I, and I'll go back to the idea you talked about. You said cops should be going out and finding bad people. I disagree completely. Cops should be judged by how safe their neighborhood is, period.
Yeah, but how does a cop make a neighborhood safe? What do they do? Isn't it by finding bad people? Like, what is it? Like, a cop isn't like building a school, or a cop isn't like...
No, it could be by police presence. It could be by police presence. What if you found nobody doing something bad in a specific area, but you simply had a lot of cops doing community policing to where bad guys felt this isn't a safe place to do stuff because the cops are very close to the community. The community is going to tell on me. I can't find a safe house. I'm going to go someplace else and do my crimes. That would be a safe community, a well-done police force. We're happy as can be. But once you say, no, they have to find people, they start kicking in doors. They start doing no-knock warrants. That's what happens when you incentivize them to go find bad people. I want you to make the community safe. Do what you think and the community agrees appropriate to make the community safe. If that means going after bad people, they will. If not, they might not have to.
I guess it feels like it's all kind of the same things. When we talk about like community policing, I mean,
sure,
having police present in certain areas are generally looking for people that are doing bad things.
They are.
Right? Or we're talking about like
is different, right? If I'm incentivized by, for example, something as simple as whatever's the local community equivalent of Yelp, I don't know what that would be, but right, maybe the police force creates that thing, right? They create the type of thing that is the police force, the equivalent of a Yelp, whatever they do, they create that. And every quarter or every year or every month or whatever it is, the people are happy and satisfied. I don't care if you arrest one guy or 400. If the people are happy, I'm pretty happy. And that's what I want. But if I'm judged by how many people I arrest, they're going to arrest people. What winds up happening is they start making more laws so they can arrest more people. As the local community starts to abide by whatever local regulations there are, then what happens, local people go, we're not arresting anybody. Then they start backing more laws. And they start adding more laws.
I feel like I understand the incentive you're trying to draw, but I feel like that in the real world, I feel like it doesn't happen.
You're correct. It doesn't. You're right.
If you have an area that's being like enforced and it's relatively peaceful, they just start crafting more laws so that they can start arresting people. I feel like this isn't something that realistically we would have to worry about, no?
No, what winds up happening is they start arresting people in whatever the poor neighborhood of the area is. So they can say they're cracking down on the local bad guy. And they turn the local worst part of the neighborhood into a horrible place because there's no other place where they can find crimes. So if I've got a county that is in general rule a pretty good county, but I have one poor neighborhood, I just shove all my cops into the poor neighborhood. And then that's how I wreck my numbers up. And the people who are in a good neighborhood go, see, cops are stopping these bad guys. When the drug use, it's almost always drugs. The drug use is probably pretty much the same throughout the entire county. But the
how is this any different than just having like a lot of like community policing though? Wouldn't it more or less look the same? You just have
I would like that too, if you want to. I'm okay with that. All I'm saying is if a community is happy, then a community is happy. I don't care whether there's one arrest or 400 arrests. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I don't want to incentivize them by arrests or by action. Well, the worst part is after the 94 crime bill, if I'm not mistaken, there were about, I think, first 50,000 and then 100,000. And 100,000 cops went into poor neighborhoods, and the federal government only paid for it for 2 years. After that, local communities had to find a way to pay for those cops. Boom, civil asset forfeiture. You just made law enforcement predatory. That's something that should have never happened. The war on drugs, as you know, I'm sure, should have ended decades ago. It should never began. But once it started, we should have ended it decades ago. We should have taken cannabis off of Schedule 1 as early as Bill Clinton. That's what we should have done. But we didn't. He should have pulled it off. If he didn't, then Bush should have pulled it off. Obama should have pulled it off. Trump should have pulled it off. Biden should pull it off. And none of them do. This is literally a racket. The war on drugs is a massive money grab and money-making scheme. That's why we don't end it. There are too many people making their career on this, and it's embarrassing. We've made law enforcement a profit center. That has to end. And this is my point. If you incentivize people to do other things, they will do other things. But we've made it to where it's lucrative to train cops to kick in people's doors, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways I agree. I think that marijuana, the whole DEA scheduling thing seems pretty suspect.
Absolutely.
And everything related to the war on drugs has been an absolute unmitigated failure.
Absolutely.
It's obviously true.
The war on drugs has made more drugs. The war on terror has made more terrorism. It hasn't fixed anything.
Wars on anything. War on poverty doesn't seem to go. Yeah, the
That's
whole
correct.
idea of having a war on X is a pretty stupid way to phrase things, or even a dumb idea to have. I don't disagree with that. I guess like the one thing I'm just having trouble getting my head wrapped around is just the idea of like, it feels like when we talk about like creating incentives for law enforcement, we'd basically be doing the same thing just in a little bit of a different way. So like, for instance, like earlier you'd suggest like we should do like community policing instead of having whatever we have now. It's like, well, what if we do community policing and all of the community policing just still happens in the poor neighborhoods with a lot of crime? Like you'd more or less see the same things happening, right? Like law enforcement is always going to be incentivized to find criminals and find people breaking the law.
But that's what you keep saying. But I'm gonna give you an example, all right, if I could.
Sure.
You personally, are you incentivized by the number of podcasts, live podcasts that you do, or are you incentivized at the end of the month? Did the right amount of money that you expected, or hopefully more than you expected, did it come in? That's how you're not incentivized by the number of live streams that you do. It is irrelevant whether you do one a month or if you do 60 a month. That's irrelevant. Sure. The point is that the right amount of money that you expected, I hope more than that, comes in every month. If it doesn't, you have to make changes. And you might decide that means more live streams, or you might decide that means longer live streams, or less live, or whatever the case may be. But if I incentivize you by the number of live streams that you do is how you get paid, you will do a whole bunch of live streams because that's how you're incentivized. And I'm equating that to number of arrests versus safer community at the end of a quarter, year, a month. If you were incentivize cops that way, they will do what's required to make it a safer environment.
Wouldn't a solution to this just literally be like any money that a cop raises by doing an arrest or whatever fine or ticket, all of that money just goes to like the city's general fund?
Not general fund. What I actually said, my plan was you take a certain amount, but you cap it, whatever that number is. In a given, say, jurisdiction, say it's $100,000 a year. I'm making the number up, right? For the sake of argument. Everything after $100,000 a year gets returned in a tax rebate to everybody there, everybody in that area. You go to a general fund, you're raising money. It's a profit center. It can't go to a general fund because
at least like
then you'll have the mayor
themselves wouldn't be like.
Then the mayor's yelling at cops to arrest more people because he needs to fill his coffers because he has a budget deficit. No, thank you. I'll pass on that. I see that stuff all the time. No,
yeah, but again, I feel like you have the exact same problem. It's just you push it down the line. So if we're saying that we're going to give a tax rebate, then you can still have a mayor hypothetically saying like, okay, I've got an election coming up. It's going to be a close one. We need a really big rebate. You guys need to really be hamming up those tickets. Like it feels like you still have the same problem. You might have a bit of a problem that you might. It's possible, right? But again, I would rather try that than just put it in the general fund. Because at a minimum, if it's just the rebate to keep the mayor or the city official happy, at least people around him would attack him for it. There'd be some defense. But if it's going to general fund, all the bureaucrats win. So they're all going to be like, yeah, put it in the general fund. But if it's not in the general fund, at least if the mayor's doing this, there'll be people who are his political enemies who will at least bring it to your attention. It's not perfect. I'm not saying it's a perfect system.
I'm saying at least it gives us some control over it. Right now, most of Americans right now are being run by inertia. We have almost no control over what most of us are doing in this one. Most Americans have given up. There's a learned helplessness you see everywhere. That's why we're fighting culture wars all the time and not trying to solve any problem.
Sure.
I mean, that's where we are now. We're not solving problems. We're fighting culture wars. I want to actually try to solve a problem.
1,000,000,000% with that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's really sad that there are so many issues right now that exist that somehow get wrapped into being part of the culture wars when it should be like a relatively non-controversial thing. You know, like when we talk about like, you know, should we be cutting taxes for huge corporations? Somehow this becomes a partisan issue where you've got a bunch of people making less than $30,000 a year championing huge businesses, you know, getting tax breaks, and it's like, why? And it's well, this is my team. Yeah, I agree with that 1,000,000%.
Yes.
I think it's really
so. A lot of people, sometimes I hear people very often, they get mad at my ideas. Larry, that can't work, or this can't work. Maybe it won't, but I'm talking about solving stuff. So help me to fix this thing. I'll bring up this corporate thing you just brought up now, right? Most people I know would like corporations to pay more. Most would, right? But when we try to tax them, it fails constantly. They find ways around it. They fix things. They change things. They find ways around this. So an idea that I brought up, which drives people crazy, but I still think it's awesome, and that is leasing naming rights to bridges in New York City. So you want, so Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever, Kellogg's wants to name a bridge in New York City. It's a bridge that is literally in a 16 million person metro area. It gets mentioned hundreds of times every single day during the traffic reports. When people are doing movies and TV shows, you'll see it in the shots when they're doing all types of media. Give us $100 million a year. You can have the naming rights to the bridge. You're responsible for maintenance. Of course, you still are. We still own the infrastructure and we still inspect it. And we get that cash, and that helps to get rid of the tolls in the bridge that actually affect the actual individual who's paying in New York City $18 to cross one bridge. And now we can actually repair the bridge without tolls and without extra taxes. That kind of thing still gets the corporations to pay more money. They're dropping $3 to $4 billion, $5 billion every year in marketing. $100 million a year is nothing. How do I know that they would actually do it? Because when I was running for governor, I had bankers coming to me asking me about how long it would be, what would be the deal, all those types of things. People were already talking about the concept. They loved the idea. They were open to financing it, the whole deal. Now, that gets the corporations to pay for infrastructure. It just allows them to do it with a carrot and not a stick. And when I get...
Does it feel...
Go ahead.
Does it feel a little... this might just be like a personal feeling, I guess. Does it feel a little dystopian?
Yes.
Like the idea that like I'm walking over the KFC bridge, and then I'm heading down into Coca-Cola Park so that I can sit on like a Amazon trademark bench. Like,
yes, it does. But the option, the alternative is what we have now, which is my state has a $50 billion deficit, $400 billion in debt, broken infrastructure, bridges that collapse, poor people who have to pay $18 to cross a bridge. That's what we have now. And no one has any other answer other than raise more taxes. 55-cent tax on gas. People are leaving my state left and right. As you know, I lost one person, or I lost a representative in the census already. Nothing but bad. My state's falling apart. So is it a bit negative? Yeah, it is. But what's your alternative? Right now, the alternative is things like congestion pricing, which keeps, again, the middle class out of the city, and the wealthy already live there. So again, that helps the wealthy and doesn't raise any money. These are failures.
What is congestion pricing?
That's if you go into the city, you pay an extra fee to go into certain parts of the city where the wealthy already live. So they don't pay it. Only poor people who want to come and pay it.
Gotcha.
So is it dystopian? Yes. If you have a better answer, my ears are open. But this would actually get the companies to voluntarily pay for infrastructure. I'll go to the pothole thing. Pizza Hut fixes potholes, right? Because it messes with their cars and their drivers. So that's the thing. They fix a pothole and they put the Pizza Hut symbol on the pothole. Well, that's really bad. So what I would do is instead allow Pizza Hut to take a couple of streets and to fix potholes in the streets. And I give them a billboard in the street. The potholes repaired by Pizza Hut. But Larry, they won't go to poor neighborhoods. They might not. I don't know. I think poor people like pizza as much as rich people. But maybe it's true. Maybe they won't go to poor neighborhoods. So what? I'm not firing all of the people who fix potholes. They can still fix the potholes. But guess where they fix the potholes? In the poor neighborhoods. So the poor people get better service. The potholes get filled. The corporations pay to fix the potholes. Everybody's happy. Is it dystopian? Maybe. But what's our answer now? Shitty roads all over my state with potholes that break everything and a deficit that we can't fix and people running out of my state. If you got a better answer, I'm open. But here's the best part. If I'm bringing up these answers and they're wrong, then you can help me make them right. All I want is the end game where I have poorer people in my state not being stuck because they can't afford to leave, and wealthy people paying what they should pay to help out people voluntarily because it makes sense for them. This is what I mean by incentivizing. I'm incentivizing the companies to fix the roads, and they would do it. They're already doing it. I would incentivize the bankers to finance it. They want to do it. They're already doing it. That's what I want to do. Take some of that money they're sending over to the Cayman Islands and put it into fixing my bridges. A better idea. That's just my view.
So in some ways, some of what you're talking about can be seen, I think, from my personal experiences in the real world. So I've made the drive several times from Nebraska down to Miami, Florida. And as soon as you hop on like the Florida Turnpike, you're on a toll road because those roads are like perfect. In my experience, at least, if I'm driving on a toll road, I know because it's very smooth, it's very nice. And as soon as you hop off, you're on like the fucking moon or Mars or whatever, with the craters and everything being. And then the city that I'm from in Nebraska, Omaha, has huge pothole problems as well. We have huge problems with infrastructure in the United States. I can't defend the current system to you, obviously. I would look stupid doing it, and we both know that it is not working in the United States for whatever reason. I guess the only difference between you and me is that I'm pushing more on the end of like public funding to fix a lot of this, which I don't know why. I don't know why the United States seems so unwilling or incapable of allocating the money that it needs to repair its infrastructure. I don't know why so many European countries seem to do it so much better than us. It's very frustrating to me. It's very embarrassing to me to travel overseas and I'll be in some itty bitty no-name German city, Krefeld, and they have like public buses that run around the clock, and I can go anywhere. And the only place in the U.S. that has any type of public transit is like New York or maybe a couple cities. So I'm kind of curious, I guess. So I guess, so actually just a couple thoughts. So
am I at least making sense to you? Am I coming from a place where you can understand where I'm coming from at least?
Yeah. Okay. So usually when people introduce themselves as libertarian, usually you have like this philosophical commitment to minimizing the role of government in any conceivable or possible way. It feels like, I guess, in terms of like you being a libertarian, it's more just you've identified a set of problems that most people in America should acknowledge these problems exist. And then you're trying to think of like, well, we haven't tried this. Let's try this. What we're doing right now doesn't work. So, maybe we can do this and maybe that'll work. And, maybe this is a bad idea and maybe it's not going to fix it 100%. But right now what we're doing isn't working.
But every idea I've come up with is no force and no extra taxes. That's the libertarian view. No force and no extra taxes. Those are the two things. And the goal is to remember, government's a monopoly. So it's a general rule. I'm trying to create another option for people that is a community-based to the best of my ability, locally based if I can do it, at a minimum private based, maybe a non-profit based, but something else. All my policies, and if anybody who cares, you go to LarrySharpe.com. My policies are still there, LarrySharpe.com/policy. Check them all out. And as I said, I have my answers for all. I went down, it's actually about 6 hours total. I went down Bernie Sanders' website in 4 different videos, and I gave up a libertarian answer for every single piece, every single thing of any one of his policies, because I believe that this is the only way. And I'll give you one minor other thing that I believe is important. Because of us specifically in America, the only way we heal our country is through the libertarian movement. The only way. And the reason why I say that is Democrats won't vote for Republicans. Republicans won't vote for Democrats. Left and right's getting torn apart. The only third party that has any power, and the Libertarian Party has hardly any power, but the only one that has any power is Libertarian Party. We are the only party that gets 50 state ballot access every single year. We're the only party that actually has some infrastructure in almost every state. We're the only party that has any chance. I mean, it's, Democrats, Republicans, and then way down to below Libertarians, but there's no one else even close to us. We are the third party. If we actually, imagine if we only had 2 or 3 Libertarians right now in the Senate, just 2, we'd be the swing vote. Guys like me talking the way I talk would be the swing vote. Most of the libertarians that people hear are edgelords on the internet. They haven't actually run for office like I have. They haven't actually run a full campaign like I have. They haven't been in debates like I have with actual politicians. They haven't talked to actual mayors and governors and people like that who understand real policy. Most haven't done that. I have. That's why I talk the way I talk. I'm speaking about how to fix actual problems in a way that has no extra taxes. And we had one libertarian congressman last year, Justin Amash. There were no others, and now he's out, so there are no libertarian people in Congress. When George Floyd died, when he was killed, the left said defund the police, the right yelled back the blue, and nothing changed. He is the first person to create a tripartisan bill. He said, Justin Amash said, you know what? Let's start with ending qualified immunity. And he realized that he couldn't do it on his own. He's the only libertarian that there is. So he literally went to the left and the right. He got Democrats, Republicans to sign it. And of course, Nancy Pelosi, Democrat, and at that point, it was Mitch McConnell, Republican. Neither of them would, of course, have any chance of voting for it. So, of course, it died. But he actually did something to fix something back in the summer. And now New York City recently actually ended qualified immunity. But we were on the ball immediately for that. We were trying to fix things immediately. And we went across the aisle. If you're a Democrat now and you cross the aisle, you get primaried out. You lose your job. You're a Republican now. You go across the aisle. You get primaried out. You lose your job. Only libertarians can cross both sides. Only. We're the only ones who can.
How do you feel about Biden's big plan for infrastructure? Are you generally against stuff like that, or?
Generally, I'm against it. Generally, but that's not 100% rule. I think we do need, if you're going to do a bailout package, and this is why. Let me be very clear on what I mean by this. I said off the bat, if you're going to do a bailout package, it should come to us as individuals. We don't do that.
Wait, what do you mean? Can you explain that? What do you mean?
Sure. For example, if you decide, and I don't know how they decide this, you're going to have $2 trillion to give away. Why are we deciding that a bunch of it goes towards police forces? A bunch of it goes towards state and local governments. A bunch of it goes towards specific places that I have cronies and friends at. Why not just say, I don't know how many households there are in America. For the sake of argument, there are 100 million. I don't know if there are. Say there's 100 million households in America. Divide that 100 million, divide 2 trillion by 100 million, write them a check. Or write them a check over time or whatever. Just have us spend it.
Well,
that's a stimulus package. If you want to do a stimulus, give us the money and we'll stimulate the economy if you want to.
I think the goal was I think the goal wasn't to just stimulate the economy. I'm talking specifically about the $2 trillion infrastructure package that had like 600 billion was supposed to go specifically to public transport, rail, roads and bridges and stuff, and then 100 billion is supposed to go towards the highway. And I gotta look up
yes, no, I know what you mean. Yeah. So that was the first piece. The second piece that bothers me about this is I don't believe any of it. We haven't built anything worth a damn in this country as a government since I don't know when. The moonshot? Is that the last time we did it? I mean, at one point we used to build stuff. We don't anymore. And the reason why we don't build things anymore is because whatever money that goes out, say it's $600 million that goes to X or Y or whatever it is, it's going to be late, expensive, and suck. Because it has. Maybe you can tell me when. I can't remember something we've built that was impressive as a government that we've actually built since the moonshot. Did I miss something? I can't think of one. They don't work. They're bad. They're over budget. I mean, NASA does some cool stuff. I'll give them that, but that's about it. Everything else has been over budget, under delivered, over promised, failed miserably. In my state, New York, my governor has gone out of his way to do at least 20 projects. Every single one of them has failed. Every one of them has failed. So great, you got $2 trillion. You're going to get maybe $100 billion worth of anything of value. The rest goes into waste, fraud, and abuse. And not just that, it goes into bureaucrats whose job it is to make sure things stop. The problem is our government is filled with people whose job it is to say no. There's no one's job it is to say yes. So the reason why I'm against it fails. What will be a better way of doing it? If you want to bail people out or build something, incentivize it being built. That is a better way of doing it. There is a better way to do it. An example might be, I'm making this up for sake of argument. Now, that's my incentivizing. You say you want to build bridges and tunnels or whatever the case may be. So you create rules and regulations to build tunnels, whatever those things are. If company X does it and it follows our rules and regulations, they get some type of benefit or bonus, like a Project X type. That is a better way of doing it. Will there still be fraud? Of course. Will there still be waste? Of course. But there'll be nowhere near as much. And now the people who can do it will go out and go do it. And they'll gain, and those companies will grow and become more powerful. But more importantly, you could even do it if you wanted to target it, right? If you wanted to target it and say, well, we want to make sure some of these companies are owned by minorities or owned by disabled vets or owned by insert group people here. And they get the benefit. If you're this thing, you get the benefit. That's a better way of incentivizing than something else. Because I don't trust the government to decide what should be built or how it should be built or when it should be built. I think they will fail. Why? Because they've been failing for at least 60 years and probably longer.
Doesn't this just take the form though of basically ending up with the government is like contracting these jobs out? Like, don't we do that to a large extent anyway when it comes to things like construction?
Because there's no control. There's no control except if you build a bridge, here are regulations. But I'm not telling you which bridge to build. I'm not telling you who to hire to build it. If it gets done, submit your paperwork, get your benefit, whatever the benefit is. If it doesn't get done, you don't get a benefit. If it's not done to our specifications, you don't get the benefit. Done.
So like if somebody just wanted to build like a bunch of random bridges in like San Francisco, like they could just like build bridges across. Like we don't want any kind of like regulatory oversight. For,
I didn't say that at all. I said literally I have my guidelines on what you have to build. But not just that. Local people, if I'm a federal government and I'm saying I'm going to incentivize you, local municipalities will still have their own rules anyway, and so will states. I'm talking from the federal level, right? If I've got X trillion dollars, whatever I've got, I would rather incentivize that way and then get people to grow in that way. The local municipalities will still have their own regulations and rules, and so will states. Why does the federal government have to be involved in this except to motivate people to act? It's a much better way of incentivizing. Again, not perfect, but better than what we have now. And I'd ask you, did I miss something? Did we do something great since the moonshot?
No, I mean, I feel like the United States has a lot of problems spending publicly.
Yep.
I guess the only pushback is returning to something I said earlier in this conversation. Like, it feels like I can travel across so many different cities in Europe that just do so much in terms of investing in like their public infrastructure.
Yep.
And you have these like amazing cities that have really cool buildings, and they've got like all this awesome like mixed residential zoning, and they've got like amazing public transport, and their roads aren't falling apart.
Yep.
And they're all doing this through forms of like government funding, like
yes.
it's all, or government spending that's all funded by taxation or whatever. So it feels like it feels like that's like a better direction to head than to go the other way, where okay, well, let's just like ultra privatize a lot of things and see if we can incentivize like private companies.
No, we've been following their example. We've just been failing at it. When I talked
but it
about
seems like it's because we're never willing to go like that far. It seems like there's always like
I disagree completely. Have you seen how Boston works? Have you seen how New York City works? All of New York State is run by Economic Development Corporation, which is run directly by the state. We have state funding in everything. We control everything in New York State. Nothing gets built unless a regional economic development corporation says it can be built. We control everything. Our Department of Buildings in New York City controls everything. We do. The problem is our culture isn't their culture. We have failed so much. We need a different answer. We've been throwing money at these problems for decades. We have all the same things. We have the same. I did a thing about the MTA. The MTA in New York City, the largest metro subway system in our country. To build anything in the MTA is at least 4 times more expensive than any other major nation on the planet, to include countries like France and Germany and England, who have unions, who have regulatory bodies, who have all those things, and large cities. Our system is garbage. It's full of nothing but garbage. I don't want it. That system's done. I would much rather change how that's done. And I talked about. Go ahead.
Why do so many European states succeed at this when the U.S. seems to fail at it? What's the difference there? Or I guess that's the thing that bothers me the most.
I'm actually unsure what the reasons are. I'm sure it's multiple reasons, but if I had to guess, I would say one of them is that we're a very litigious society, far more than they are. And most people are afraid of failure because a mistake or failure wraps them up in court like there's no tomorrow, costs them so much money and devastates them, gets people fired. We have a zero tolerance culture, right? You make one mistake, you're fired. You do one thing wrong, you're done. All these things are bad, and everybody gets sued for every single thing. So I don't know if that's the biggest piece, but I'm sure that's a part of it. It's one of the reasons why that we don't get things done. Everybody, our entire system is set up. For example, I'll give you an example. Again, I'll go in New York State. The environmental department here in New York State, its goal is to just protect the environment. That's a terrible goal. The goal should be to ensure that New York State can build and grow while protecting the environment. You might say, does that really matter? It does tremendously, because that means the organization is set up to say no, not to show how it can be done safely. That's not their job. Their job is to say no if it isn't perfect. And that's most of our government agencies now across the country, to all of them in New York State, New York City that way. But most of them across the country, they are set up to only say no if it's not perfect, and not to say, no, this is bad. Let me show you how you can build this correctly. Let me assist you and be your partner in getting this built. We don't do that. If we instead had a system to where, again, I'll go and incentivize. How is a bureaucrat incentivized? And I believe, who was it? I think it might have been Fareed Zakaria, who just did a show on this, on a CNN show. He was talking about how everyone is incentivized to say no, because if I let you build this thing and something goes wrong, I'm in trouble, I'm fired. So I'm going to stop you at every point. But the reverse isn't true. If I help 25 people build something safely in their community or area, that's just my job. Well, good done. There's your paycheck. But I should be incentivized by what gets built safely, right? Did this thing get built? It did. Did people get hurt? No. Well done. You are now incentivized for that. Well done. You get promoted, or you get a bonus, or whatever is the appropriate thing in your job, right? You get accolades or a little ribbon or whatever is the thing. I was in the Marine Corps. We like ribbons. So whatever is the thing you get, right? You get that thing because stuff was built safely, not something went wrong and now you're punished. The incentivization of our government and our bureaucrats is exactly the wrong way of incentivizing them, and they act accordingly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I think the best thing you said is probably that, like, some of these things need to start on local levels so that we can see how they work.
Absolutely.
One thing that is really damaging, I think, to the progress in this country is we have become hyper-focused on federal level stuff, and local level stuff is just seen as like not cool and nobody cares. But it seems like most of the successful, I like the idea, for instance, like a lot of people think we need single payer or multi-payer. Well, California has, like, I think Medi-Cal, I think is what it's called. And hey, if it works really well here, maybe that expands to other states. I think that starting things at local levels is better. It'd be interesting to see, like, this hardcore kind of private incentivization that you're talking about, I guess, start at some local area, and then we can kind of see how it goes. I guess, unfortunately, the only big examples that I can think of have run into huge problems. So, like, I know in the United Kingdom, they tried to privatize a lot of their rails, and the companies that competed for that ended up not producing the best results.
But hold on, I want to be clear on this. You've used that phrase more than once, and I've never used it. I've never talked about privatizing. I'm not talking about privatizing. I'm sorry, when you say, in terms of private, I mean, you're talking about setting up different chains of incentivization, I guess, right? Correct. Yes.
So so theoretically could all still be government related.
Absolutely.
It would just be incentivized different. Oh, okay.
Yes, incentivized differently, and no matter what, the government still owns the asset. The government doesn't give the asset away; it still owns it and still inspects it. If you
want the government, so like, let's say that, like, a private company like built a bridge and designed it to all their specs and everything, and then named it, the government would still own the bridge.
Correct, absolutely, but there'd be some reason, some incentive for them to do so. For example, I'm making this up again for the sake of argument. Depends on where this is in the country, if it makes sense. In a large city like New York City, you build the bridge, you get to name it for 20 years. That's now your bridge for 20 years. Right? Done. That kind of thing. Again, people would say, well, Larry, it's going to cost $1 billion to build the bridge. Not that much, because they'll make it for less. But it's our inspection. It'll follow our rules. It doesn't count. If they don't do this, it doesn't count. It's got to be to our rules, our specifications. If they do it and it works, then great. They get the benefit, whatever the benefit would be. Obviously, in smaller areas, naming a bridge isn't going to be the right answer. But there may be maybe it's they make 10 bridges, they get all 10 of them, or whatever the case may be. I don't know if naming rights is the answer for everything. I just know in New York City it is. That I'm sure. I don't know if it would work in other areas. But you get the benefit if you do the thing. That's a much better way of doing it. We still own it. We still own it. We still inspect it. Right now in New York State, bridges still collapse. Right now, they collapse. I would argue that if we had more corporate sponsorship of bridges, less would collapse. And my example is we already have corporate sponsorship for cleaning and taking care of the litter on roads. Already we have that in New York State. And the roads that have that are cleaner. So
it kind of reminds me of the I think we've got like the Adopt a Interstate program or whatever, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes, and those interstates are cleaner. It has worked. So if we have this, that's the example I use, right? Naming rights. People drop 20 million companies, not people. Companies drop $20 million a year for a stadium that's used on the weekends. I'm talking about a bridge that's used every day. That's on Google Maps now as they cross. That's worth some cash. It's worth some cash. It's a way that we can actually get the people to pay the cash that we want them to pay, and they'll want to. They'll happily do it. This is not a bad idea.
Sure. So if I can jump in briefly, just checking time. We normally run these for 2 hours. First, happy to run it long if you guys want to keep going. Second, would you guys mind taking about 15 minutes for questions? There were some people asking if they could ask both you guys questions.
I'm happy to take questions if you are.
Yeah, questions are fun.
All right. Do you guys want to keep going or you want to jump straight to questions?
We can go to questions unless you want. If you have something to say, Destiny, tell me, please.
No, I mean, I think we understand each other.
All right. So the first one we had, first commentator was asking if he could ask a question. Anyone else, if you want to, go ahead and DM me directly, and we'll organize it from there.
I love it. We'll start taking questions. I love it. Most of these things, when I ran my campaign, I ran for about 1.5 years in New York State. I did the entire thing live on Facebook and never took notes and just took every question that came at me. I'm happy to do it. Happy to do it. And I got yelled at a lot. So that's fine. And I still get yelled at. So it's okay. I don't mind at all.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay? Hi, my name's First Amender. I'm going to apologize in advance before I ask a question, because I just want to give you guys like a short monologue to bear with me. I hope you guys both might like this at the end of it. So like I wanted to say I'm like a really huge fan of both of you guys. And from what I've heard, it sounds like both of you are agreeing more than disagreeing. I was assuming much more disagreement, to be honest. And because Destiny is far more versed in online debates, I sort of felt bad for Larry Sharpe, as I'm not sure he's as versed in online debates than Destiny is. Though with that being said, Destiny, huge fan. I watched like all of your videos. The recent one on Richard Wolff was hilariously good. And from here on out, tanky socialists forever have a stain on their repertoire among debate circles. And for that, you keep pushing extremism out of political circles on the right and the left. And as well as many other contributions, I thank you for your effort. And for Larry, I wanted to say that if I lived in New York, I would have voted for you and would have helped you in your election.
Thank you, brother.
I run a freedom-based blog platform. It's not a big website, but I believed in your platform so much that I made an ad for my site so people reading articles would consider you and help you get elected. It was a shame that libertarians tend not to win elections.
True.
But regardless, you hold your standards of legality and morality, how things should be. And you are what I would call a moral politician. When someone says something like all politicians are evil, I can easily use the name Larry Sharpe and show that these evil politicians, in fact, can be good.
Wow. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
Okay. Questions now. I'm sorry for the
No,
monologue.
you can call me cool all day long. Keep going.
Destiny. Okay, so I tend not to argue against what you think on most subjects. They just simply make sense. With that being said, how is it that you call yourself a democratic socialist and not something like a centrist? It sounds to me that you believe in private markets. Why would you place the word socialist to describe your politics?
This is depending on what circles you're running. This might sound like equivocation, but I never call myself a democratic socialist. I call myself a social democrat. I think I'm probably based on everything that I know of the views of different people across the political spectrum, I think social democrats are pretty accurate. I'm in favor of private markets, but I think that capitalism is incredibly useful, and I think that markets are very powerful and should be respected. But I am usually in favor of much higher levels of social spending, which I think is like about what a social democrat is. So I'd be compared to like a Nordic or Scandinavian person, I guess, basically.
Okay, that's fair. And for Larry, so libertarians have an issue in winning elections. As a result, it might actually be best to register as a Republican and push libertarian policies to actually make differences. So what do you say about this idea? And if it's a bad idea, why?
It's a terrible idea because Republicans aren't libertarians. Republicans pretend they're libertarians and they make us all look bad, but they're not actually libertarians.
I mean, yeah, right? They're not. I mean, they maybe in the 80s they were more libertarian. Maybe but like now they're.
But now they just make us look bad. So no, because we're not Republicans. But not just that. Look at what's happened with. Again, I'll go back to Justin Amash. He started the Freedom Caucus, and he left because it got co-opted by more mainstream Republicans. But not just that. The Republican Party is going to always be like the Democrat Party in one way. They don't have any policies that aren't anti the other. Their policies aren't focused on actual success. Their policies are focused on I'm not the other. That's the issue. Libertarians are the only people who can actually make impact. That we can be the peacemakers. It's possible. If people got mad at me because they didn't get behind Trump or get behind Biden during the election, what difference did it make? If we remember, Bush got us Obama, Obama got us Trump, Trump got us Biden. You like or hate one of them, probably if you're an American, so they rotate back and forth. Biden will give us probably Kamala. Kamala will lose to whatever the cool Republican is next time, and we'll go back to being Republicans again. Nothing changes. The only way things change is if there's a third party and a mediator. We can be the mediator. That's why I want to say libertarian.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Destiny. This is like an amazing time. Thank you.
All right, next question is my own for both of you guys, but I guess we'll start with Destiny. The recent Biden administration proposal for the infrastructure bill, I believe it was tagged at nearly $2 billion.
Ouch.
2 trillion.
Roughly, oh, I'm sorry, 2 trillion.
Yeah.
Not 2 billion.
Yeah. I wish it was 2 billion.
Roughly 5% of that goes to roads and bridges.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
That infrastructure package looks unbelievably amazing to me. I'm a huge fan of it. If that actually passed, I think it would be like unbelievable. There's so much money in that going to like much needed infrastructure projects across the United States. For whatever reason, it seems like we have so much trouble passing these types of big things. I don't know why we send so much money to like places overseas. We spend a lot of money in Afghanistan. I think it would be awesome if it passes. I hope for the best, but yeah.
I think it is a terrible idea because it's not going to work at all. I don't trust government to do it right. I think they will fail miserably. If they were going to do something right, here's what I would have them do instead. One of two things, or both. One, end all of the embargoes and sanctions that we have against every country and every person across the country and across the world. End them all. Allow us to start opening up business in all of those different companies. End the military-industrial complex by first declaring victory in every hot war we have and begin to pull our troops back. Then, at the same time, begin slowly, as our treaties begin to end, pulling back the empire. Pull the empire back so we stop spending so much money on all this garbage that we spend money on. And then as that happens, opening up businesses so that we can take those people and bring business back in, because the military-industrial complex is a massive jobs program. That's why we don't get rid of it. It's not because there's anything of any value to it other than that. It's a massive jobs program. So find other ways of people to make money and to have jobs and careers while we bring the military-industrial complex down. Second part that I would add, instead of this, if we're going to spend money, if we're going to actually spend that amount of money, debt relief is far more important for the average American. The average American can actually deal with the idea of not making as much money. That will suck, but an average American will tighten their belt and deal with it. What crushes them is what they owe, their debt. I would do some debt relief. And you might say, Larry, you're saying bail out the banks? I kind of am, and it sounds horrible. I know libertarians are going to get mad at me when I say that, but I would rather have a real debt holiday. Something like say, hey, all banks, if you're in America, you may not force anyone to pay any debt for 3 months. I'm making that up for sake of argument, but something like that. And we're going to write you a check and make magic money from the Fed, because we just always make magic money anyway. We'll make our magic Fed money and we'll write you a check. You'll have your actuaries tell us what the bill is. We'll give you X dollars, X cents on a dollar. Basically, the government will buy the debt, is basically what I'm saying. The government will buy 3 months of debt from every American. Something like that That's way better for Americans. That's way better as a stimulus. Something like that. That's a much better plan. End the military-industrial complex, which is a jobs program, so that we can grow across the country and give debt relief to Americans.
All right. So I'll try to carve out just another 10 minutes for questions before we close up here. Next question we have is from Mosk Strauman for Larry Sharpe. Do you think that Rand Paul represents libertarianism to an acceptable degree for a Republican?
For a Republican, yes, but he's not libertarian, right? Rand Paul is the one who wrote the Justice for Breonna Taylor bill, right? That's what Rand Paul did. So yes, for a Republican, yes, but he's not libertarian. He is a Republican.
All right. Next question is from Bratito for both of you guys. I guess we'll start with Destiny. Do you believe in the Electoral College?
I think it's okay. So especially now, because the left seems to be getting more and more people. Now, I think a lot of people on the left kind of want to just make everything done by popular vote everywhere because they think they have the numbers for it. But I maybe this is a little bit old-timey in how I think. I still like the idea of there being both representation of people and representation of states when it comes to making decisions on things. So here's two ends that I would approach this from. I think that the Electoral College is okay in that smaller states are disproportionately greater represented per person, because I think there should be some type of state representative when it comes, or some type of state representation when it comes to choosing our head of state. However, that exists in the Senate as well. I would be in favor of lifting the cap on the number of representatives we have and dramatically rebalancing that, which would also change how the Electoral College works as well, because the Electoral College, I believe, is your number of representatives plus might
plus
just be
senators.
That plus two. Is
plus
it plus
senators?
Yeah, plus senators.
Plus, oh yeah, plus two. Yeah. Oh yeah, so plus senators. Yeah. So the rebalancing of the House would also rebalance the Electoral College, and then I would also be in favor of. I think that the Electoral College. I think every state should split their vote like Nebraska and Maine do. I don't know why they don't. I think winner take all is really dumb. So that if I were to change the Electoral College, it would be in those two ways. Make it more proportional, but still give a little bit more weight to the smaller states. Make it so that every state splits their electoral vote. I don't think that it's necessarily inherently bad that smaller states are disproportionately represented in some ways. Otherwise, they would have absolutely no representation.
There's a worse part to this that people often don't talk about. And I know from doing presidential campaigning and helping out presidential campaigners, the way the Electoral College works with winner take all, why should anybody ever come to New York or California? There's no need. Don't ever come to New York, California. Don't ever. And they don't. So they only go to swing states. So the way you fix that, to follow what Destiny's talking about, is you have some form of system that's something like this. And again, I'm open to it. But the concept is whoever wins the state gets half electoral votes. Then the other half is divvied up by percentage. What that would do is that would encourage every candidate to go to every state and care about every state because they could win something, right? Why would Trump go to New York? He's not going to win any of our electoral votes. But what if he could win a chunk of them? If say he got 1/3 of the votes in New York State, well, half would have gone to Biden, and then out of the other half, 1/3 of that would have gone to him. He would have got a couple of votes. It makes sense for the people in New York State who are Republicans to care about New York State. It makes sense for the Democrats in Oklahoma to actually go out and try to vote and get a couple electoral votes for their Democrat in Oklahoma. So I'd like to break it up that way, if at all possible, something like that, to where the person who loses gets less than the amount, but still gets something as an incentive for the local Democrats and Republicans in the red and blue states to still hustle for the presidential candidate to get something out of the campaign. Otherwise, why bother? And that's one big issue. When it comes to representation at the congressional level, I would adjust the Senate, but I would not make the Senate the same as the House. I would do something like, as an example, the top 15, 16 states get 3 senators, the middle 14 or whatever the number is, get 2, and the bottom 16 get 1. Something like that. That would be a fairer Senate. But at that point, we're talking amendment to the Constitution. And that kind of thing is probably never going to happen. So I don't think we can change much of that in the Senate or in Congress. We're probably not going to get an amendment that way. So I'd rather make it to where the states would be a little bit fairer to the losing party or parties, so that people want to hustle. Imagine if a Libertarian or a Green Party could actually get an electoral vote, right? Because they get 10% of a state. and that would get them one electoral vote. It makes a change. They get a say. It would be a much better system.
All right. Next question is from Madman. You guys talked a bit about lifting embargoes and restrictions against other countries, particularly Larry here. So first, starting with Larry, what would your response be to human rights abuses and economic exploitation in other countries? For example, how should the U.S. respond to China and the Uyghur Muslims?
Absolutely. It's a great question. The sanctions and such actually don't work, right? These things, they make us feel good, but they don't change anything. It doesn't matter. The fact is, Americans want to spend 25 cents for their crayons at Walmart. And if that happens to be, made by Uyghur slave labor, we tend to be okay with that because no one talks about it. I think you have to use the bully pulpit and use actual economic pressure. What does that mean? That means trading with everybody, even those who use slave labor. Trade with everybody as much as you possibly can, because what winds up happening is their middle class will begin to grow, number one, which is a great thing, but their oligarchs will still make tons of money. Of course they will, because oligarchs always make tons of money. But then I use the bully pulpit and do what Biden was talking about. This part was good. He was talking about not ignoring it, not staying silent. And I go out of my way to tell people, if you're buying your 25-cent crayons from Walmart, you are saying slave labor is okay. That's what you're doing. And I say that in the bully pulpit every week, every month. That's what's happening right now. And if Americans decide, I don't care, I'm okay with slave labor, then why should the government do anything if the people actually don't care? But I think they do care. And I think what would happen is there'd be a marketing piece that would have to change and shift. And people would stop buying their 25-cent crayons from Walmart. And Walmart will go, guys, stop your policies or we're buying from Vietnam instead, which is a little bit better. And so we'll go to Vietnam, which is not slave labor, but it's kind of close. But we'll go there instead. And I think that is a long-term solution. That is not fix it overnight. But we've been fighting this type of thing for 30 or 40 years, and it hasn't worked. Let's try my way for 10, and I bet you'll see a difference.
So Destiny, what do you think about economic sanctions? Do they work, and should we be using them?
I mean, like as part of like a broader like foreign policy plan initiative, I think that sanctions are fairly effective. I mean, you look at places like Iran have been like pretty crushed by economic sanctions. Ideally, this is supposed to bring them closer to willing to make like deals or negotiations with the United States. Arguably, that the Iranian nuclear deal that we had in place, they might have been more incentivized to agree to that because of how strict some of the sanctions were. As part of forging that agreement was like lifting a lot of the restrictions and embargoes on that country and unfreezing a lot of their assets. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, I'm in favor of using sanctions and embargoes as forms of soft power to exert influence over other countries.
But do you think they work? I mean, you think that's what stopped Iran? You think that's what made them decide? I mean, I don't see them working. Cuba hasn't. All it does is, and to be forward for so many people who are socialists, all it does is it allows us to crush socialist countries so they have no chance of success. That's what we actually use them for. We don't use them to actually do anything.
Well, the problem is because America is because of how swingy our electoral system has got, it's hard for us to have like a single mind in terms of moving towards some type of solution or anything. Like what a sanction is supposed to do is a sanction is supposed to hurt you enough to where you're willing to come to the table to negotiate something. But it feels like for a lot of countries, we don't know what we want to negotiate. I guess. Yeah, that's just kind of a weakness right now in terms of because our foreign policy takes like a wildly different shape depending on who the particular president is. So I mean, look at Trump. Trump literally just walked us out of certain treaties. He walked us out of the Iranian nuclear agreement. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that's an indictment of sanctions so much as an indictment of America's kind of directionless foreign policy at some points.
Let me try something crazy here. What if we instead said to Iran, as an example, Iran, if you want to build a nuclear bomb, good luck. We're going to stop all our sanctions and we want to buy a bunch of your rugs and all kind of stuff. And if you want to trade from us, you can buy anything you want from us. We're going to stop. In fact, all those bases we have in Iraq, we're going to pull them all out. We're going to pull out of Iraq. We're going to pull out of Afghanistan. Iran, good luck, my friend. I hope things go well for you. We're here for you if you need us. Let's trade. What if we did that? And people would say, oh my God, they'll get a nuclear bomb. Oh my God, they'll do all these cool things. There's zero evidence that would happen. The best example I can give is Vietnam. We ran out of Vietnam. We lost that war after dropping more bombs on Vietnam in 10 years than we dropped on Japan and Germany combined in all of World War II. We devastated that country. We killed 2 million of them at least, if not more. And when we left, 20 years later, they were a trading partner. And now you can buy furniture from Vietnam if you want to. You just leave Iran alone. They'll be our trading partner in 10 years. 20 years probably.
I mean, we could be a trading partner, but I think the problem is just that I think there is strong evidence that Iran would pursue a nuclear weapons program.
They get a nuclear weapon. Okay, you're right. They get a nuclear weapon. So what? Pakistan has nuclear weapons. They are much more volatile and much more anti-American, or as anti-American as we are. Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan. Pakistan has weapons. So what?
Well, this is true. I think that the problem that we run into then is the types of, and this is the reason why I tend to fight a lot with, I notice that a lot of people have a very hardcore, and it sounds like you might be on this, a very hardcore anti-imperialist bend when it comes to American foreign influence.
100%.
And it feels like one of the problems, one of the oversights to that is that if we take that mind, the problem is if you step out of that area, then it feels like you leave a vacuum that other people are going to seek to fill.
So what?
And so then America loses its ability to negotiate or have a place kind of like as the world leader. So then you have less ability to forge different deals. You have less access to certain markets.
100% not true. Not even close. Come on, man. Let's say we walk out of the Middle East tomorrow. We're not gonna, but sake of argument, we literally just pack our bags and walk out tomorrow. And the Russians step in, or the Chinese step in, or whomever steps in. Good. Now they'll get killed instead of us. And we can sell them bullets to kill each other instead of them selling bullets to their people to kill us. Right now, China sells guns to those people to kill us. Now we can sell guns to them to kill Chinese. Who cares? It's not going to hurt us in any way. We can get out.
I think it would, because I think we have certain trading partners. Like if you look at the Gulf states, like I don't know if people like Saudi Arabia or Qatar or the UAE, I don't know if these states are going to look as favorably upon us if we're going to be able to sell them as many things as we do. Or
so you're telling me that Saudi Arabia, once we stop being in Iran, now that maybe has Iran that might be, could be more aggressive or not, whatever they decide. So Saudi Arabia's going to stop buying our weapons? That's what we sell them. We sell them weapons. They're going to keep buying our weapons. In fact, now they'll buy more.
Potentially, but I mean, like they could also forge a stronger relationship with, say, China or Russia. I don't know in terms of Russia now, but at least with China, because I mean, China can manufacture a lot of what we can, right?
So what? Then that means the Iranians will buy our weapons. So what?
But so then now we're kind of like tipping the scales to where now all of these different like Gulf states, for instance, are going to be more favorable towards China than they are towards the United States at the moment, right? And you might see that influence creep into other parts of the world as well. Like China's buying a lot of influence across Africa and even South America too.
Yes, absolutely. So again, why do I care? So my answer instead is to stay in the Middle East and they all hate us. Do some of the oligarchs in the Middle East like us? Yes, because we fill their pockets, 100% because we support their regimes. But the average person in the Middle East can't stand our government. They hate our government. They tend to like Americans in general. They tend to, but they hate our government. So if we actually just walked away, they're not going to hate our government anymore. It's impossible. We kill them almost on a daily basis. We are responsible for their misery almost on a weekly or monthly basis. What's the worst that happens?
I think it super depends on the state we're talking about in terms of if they like us or don't like us. Like I'm pretty sure Israel has a pretty favorable view of the United States. I'm pretty sure most of the Gulf states have a pretty favorable view of the United States. Even the people there, I'm pretty sure we have like pretty strong alliances with a lot of these people. For some reason, like even Turkey has a pretty positive opinion of the United States. It's considered a strong U.S. ally. I think that like if we end up just exiting that place, the vacuum that's created there, I guess it depends on if you don't care about U.S. influence in any part of the world, or if you don't care about like China's
I do care about influence. I don't care about American military influence. We still have to, come on. The whole world speaks English. They all watch our movies. They all speak our slang. They all sing our songs. Our culture is everywhere. Our influence is powerful.
But that scale is starting to tip a little bit towards China. Yeah?
No, not even close. Most of the world does not speak Chinese. That's
most of the world doesn't speak Chinese yet, but so for instance.
So hold on, let's say you're right.
20 years ago, I don't, and maybe my age is showing, I'm only 32, but from what I can remember, 20 years ago, I don't think we really talked much in the United States about like, okay, what is our business plan so that we're successful in Chinese markets. Whereas if you look today in the tech world and then even in entertainment, you talk about like the entire world watches US movies. That's true.
Yep.
Well, now the entire world is watching US movies that are sometimes crafted in ways to appeal to Chinese audiences too, right?
Absolutely.
So you can see like that influence growing as well. I don't know. I kind of like sitting at the top of the world hegemony, I guess, in terms of making decisions related to like world policy, whether we're talking Security Council in the UN, whether we're talking in terms of like global climate policies, whether we're talking about multilateral trade agreements. I think that being in a stronger negotiating position as somebody that has a lot of influence like the US is probably preferable to taking a back seat to other players that are more willing to get involved in areas like China or Russia.
But you're assuming that the reason why we have any of that is because of our military power. And I would argue that China has been growing for exactly the reason I'm talking about. We have been throwing our money, time, energy, and goodwill away on useless forever wars, while China has been buying up property, territory, and influence throughout the rest of the world. I'm saying let's stop bombing people and invading people, and let's stop buying influence like they are. The reason why they're on the rise is because they're not fighting in Afghanistan. They're not fighting in Syria. They're not fighting in any other place. They're not doing forever. They don't have a massive empire. All their money, time, and energy is put into growing financially, as ours should be. That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but I mean, like, we can do both. I think China does a really good job with their foreign influence, and in terms of how they reach out. The student exchange programs they've got going on with African students, their One Belt, One Road initiative, and trying to build out all the ports and everything. I think China does a really great job there. I guess I just get a little bit worried sometimes when I think that the world would look a bit different if the United States were to just exit, immediately all of our, I'm not a big fan of a lot of our current military theaters. Afghanistan has a lot of problems and is very directionless. Stuff going on in Yemen.
Is there a war you like?
What?
Is there a war you like that we should be in?
Well, I don't think the idea of just having like a military base in a country, I don't think is necessarily negative. I think that those types of relationships that we have with other countries and our ability to move, like military vessels around the world, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think there's a big difference between like, there's a U.S. naval base in this country versus we have an active, ongoing occupational presence in a country, right? Like our military bases in Japan are probably pretty important considering, China's aggression in the Southeast Asian that
I was at one. This photo behind me was me at one in Japan.
Yeah, so I don't think that Japan would feel very good as an ally of them if we were to just say like, okay, well, we're gonna remove everything from here. If China does some stuff, if North Korea keeps testing, they're moving towards their ICBM program, like good luck. I think that there are people that do appreciate that U.S. presence around the world. I know it's popular to say, like, oh, everybody hates us everywhere, but I don't think that's really true.
The reason why the Japanese want us there is only the same as why the Koreans want us there. It's not because they care about our troops, because they know that they can't get nuked. This is part of our nuclear umbrella, right? That's what it's about. Because
with NATO, right? Yeah.
That's correct. If China nukes Korea or Japan, they will affect Americans, and we will counter nuke them. That's the reason why they want our troops there. They don't think that we can actually win a land war against China. They don't think that China's going to invade Japan and send their troops against Japan and take over Kyushu or Hokkaido. They don't think that at all. They're worried about nuclear warfare. That's why our troops are there. So if we can end the idea of a nuclear warfare and just say, we're pulling out. If you nuke anybody, we will nuke you. We get the same bang for the buck.
I guess I don't know how realistic that is in terms of saying like, if anybody does anything anywhere, we're going to respond with nuclear arms. Like it's
no. Only if you nuke.
Well, but what about if China just I don't think it's possible for Russia to roll tanks into a NATO country.
Correct.
Because it's a NATO country. It's not going to happen, right? So I think that there are people, when you look at like even countries like Estonia that have a US base in there because they've been rolled into NATO, like I think that they probably consider that to be pretty positive. And we consider the influence that we have there to be positive as well. I think just pulling out of all of that and saying, well, Russia, if you do anything, we're going to,
I didn't say that. Only if they nuke.
Oh, so does that mean that they can roll armies in anywhere and just take over people then if they can't?
Yeah, let's say Russia does that. Let's walk down every road you talk about. I'm happy to walk all the way down that road. Let's say Russia decides we're going to invade Ukraine. We're going to roll our tanks across and we're going to take over Ukraine. I would ask you an important question, Destiny. Are you prepared to send your friends, your loved ones, the people that you care about, to go die for Ukraine?
Yeah, I think we have to. Yeah.
I'm not. I think it's a terrible idea. I think it is a horrible idea. It didn't work in Vietnam, didn't work in Yemen, didn't work in Afghanistan, didn't work in anything.
World War II, right?
We weren't going there. That's not why we went there. We weren't going there. We went there because they attacked us.
Well, Japan attacked us, and then we went to Europe, right?
Germany,
I mean, we eventually got to Japan.
Germany declared war on us. We never declared war on Germany. We weren't going to go fight Germany. Germany declared war on us because Germany declared war on us.
Sure.
In both cases, we were attacked or war was declared upon us. Different issue. Ukraine's not declaring war on us. Russia's not declaring war on us. Russia's not attacking us. We are now getting involved in someone else's war. I'll pass. It has never worked. When we're attacked, we retaliate. Of course we do. Japan attacked us and Germany declared war on us. No, we didn't declare war on Finland. Finland was a German ally. We didn't declare war on Finland because Finland was never going to attack us. No, we were never going to face a Finnish assault ever. We might have felt with Romanians or Bulgarians that we fought in Europe, maybe, but we were never going to deal with Finns. We never declared war on Finland.
So in the case of World War II, or we could go even further into the future. We can look at the first Gulf War. We can look at intervention in Bosnia or Yugoslavia. For World War II, let's say that Germany's empire continues to grow. As long as we never get attacked, then we should just chill and keep trading with everybody. Is that the goal? We don't have any investment in who ends up being at the table of the world leaders?
I think what we do is what we did in places like Vietnam and such. If that were to happen, right? You want to go down World War II? I'll go down that road. I'm happy to go down that road. Let me do the Ukrainian road, then I go down Germany's road. Ukraine today, the Russians decide they're going to invade Ukraine. Good luck holding Ukraine. Please tell me one modern nation in the past, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years, who's been able to conquer land and hold it.
Well,
land is a pain in the ass to hold. More people, more problems.
Ukraine. Okay,
That's number one.
I'm having a huge failure in geography. It was in Ukraine, literally like a satellite of the Soviet Union.
It was. Yes.
Yeah. So they held Ukraine. Yeah, actually, that's true because it's called the Ukraine, which I think means like the front lands or something. That was why it was, I think, given even that name or something.
That's
so,
correct.
yes. I mean, like the Soviet Union held a lot of these territories for quite a long time.
What, 60 years? It's about
that's
right.
A 70 decent years, amount of time. Yeah, so I think that's a good amount of time. Yeah.
In the history of the world, not much, and they were rebellious there too. If the Germans in World War II, many people don't know this, if the Germans didn't have their horrible Nazi ways, when they went to Ukraine, Ukraine was prepared to change sides and join the Germans against the Russians. But the Germans didn't care. They were so busy at killing Jews and killing Ukrainians. Their horrible policies, because they were Nazis, obviously. The Ukrainians would have actually joined and fought against the Russians. So first off, could they do it? Probably not. But not just that. Let's say they do. Let's say they actually invade Ukraine, and now they're in Ukraine. You tell me the European Union's going to be okay with that? They're going to go, yeah, whatever. Guess we lost Ukraine. Next.
Well, are you telling me but the European Union isn't prepared to mobilize like the United States is, right? Do you think the European Union is going to try to intervene? And also, hold on. Why should the European Union be motivated to do anything? Because wouldn't a Larry Sharpe in France say the same thing? Like, okay, well, my fellow Frenchmen, do you guys want to go die for? You want your friends and family to go die for a war that's happening over in Ukraine? Like, wouldn't that be the exact same?
If there was a Larry Sharpe in France, probably yes. But if there was a Larry Sharpe in, say, Poland, no, because now you're on my border. Now,
well,
yeah,
this is kind of the problem, though, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, if we're only looking at our immediate future, then anybody that's looking like a little bit more long term is always going to be like one step ahead of you, because anything that like an empire, like what the German Empire was, or the Soviet Union or whatever, that's just encroaching on one country at a time, is always going to have success against that one smaller power, right? In a way, this is almost kind of like what happened with appeasement with Germany in World War II.
Yeah,
it seems like that kind of plan is always going to lead to like some empire growing and then eventually being able to like put us in a really bad position.
But I asked you a specific question, and the question was, are you prepared to send your people over? And I said no. I asked that question because our Constitution has a decent thing in it that I like tremendously, which is only the Congress can declare war. So if the American people say, yes, this is a bridge too far, we are prepared to send our sons and daughters to die in Ukraine, then the Congress declares war. And then we send our sons and daughters to die in Ukraine. But it's not because some president goes, American interest, which is what we do. This is a trivia question for your listeners. When's the last time the United States declared war?
Oh man, hold on. Was it even the first? Did we even actually declare war against Saddam Hussein? We asked for an authorization of military force. I don't know if that was a declaration of war.
1942 against Bulgaria, Romania, and the other German satellite states. Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania. Yet we've been in perpetual war for 80 years.
Sure.
This is what has to stop. If you believe, and the people can say, yes, I believe this is it, I'm prepared to send my sons and daughters off to die in Ukraine, I'm in. We voted for it. The country's in. Let's go do it. I'm against us deciding American interests and now Marines have to die. That's not the answer. But if you're telling me the American people say, yes, I'm prepared. If you vote yes and say, tell your Congress, yeah, my son, when he's old enough, I want him to go fight in Ukraine and die. Okay, go. I'm in.
Sure. Well, so like, I don't necessarily disagree. So, sure, but this is kind of a different question, right? So technically, I support the democracy, and we shouldn't go to war if we don't want to, even if I agree. So the question was initially whether or not I would agree with a particular war. Should we send people to die over like the will of the American people? Obviously, I think that the will of the American people is important, and we should get that before we formally declare war on anybody. Now, we didn't formally declare war, but I'm pretty sure that we did have popular support for military for military operations, because we did do a vote.
That's not a thing. That's some shit we made up. That's not in the Constitution. That's some shit we made up. We just decided.
Sure, I mean, we can call it what we want, but if we would, I mean,
no, we shouldn't. We should call it war.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that, like, if you lived in the U.S., it sounds like you're from New York. After 9/11, we would have voted to go to war with Iraq. But we would have voted to go to war with any country in the world, probably. Bush could have literally thrown it on a map, and we would have voted in support of going to war. So I understand that maybe we didn't do it like a formal declaration of war, but there was congressional action that had the use of military force authorized there, and the American public would have supported it 100%.
Then why didn't we declare war on Afghanistan?
Why didn't we?
Yes. Because they didn't want war against Afghanistan, because they wanted military action that the president could control. And that's my point. That should never exist. That should never exist. Well, I'm sorry, there's one exception: responding to a nuclear attack. With that exception, the exception of responding to a nuclear attack, that should never exist. The president should never be able to say, we're going to just put troops in the country because of American interest. No, declare war or good luck, guys. But there's a second piece I want to deal with here.
Well, real quick on the first one. How do you deal with removing what you consider to be like terrorist aspects? So when we went to Afghanistan, our goal wasn't to destroy the Afghanistani government. We didn't want to declare war on Afghanistan, but technically the military action was supposed to be against the Taliban. So I guess in your world, or what would be your ideal way? Like, do you
100%. We need basically 3 parts to our military, plus a side part. 3 parts of military plus a side part. Number 1, we have to keep our nuclear deterrent. So nuclear weapons have to exist in America. We have to keep a nuclear deterrent. That's critical. We should keep them upgraded, spend the money. I'm totally fine with that. No worries. Second, we need to have massive cyber ability, which we do not. We are far behind other nations. We need to have cyber attack. Cyber is the new MAD, mutually assured destruction, that nuclear was back in the day. We're in Cold War II. Cold War I was against Soviet Union as the senior partner, China as a junior partner. We fought our proxy wars against China. Now in Cold War II, because we won the Cold War I, but we lost the peace. And when we lost the peace, now China is our number 1 in Cold War II, with Russia is now the second. We fight our proxy wars against Russia now instead of against China in Syria and stuff like that. Different issue. Afghanistan, we fight the proxy wars there instead. So we've changed that. Back then in the day of the Cold War, we were ahead of the game the whole way through. Against China, we're behind. In the first Cold War, espionage was the key way we fought, and mutually assured destruction was nuclear. China, it's the markets that are our fight, and cyber is the actual mutual assured destruction. So we need to have massive cyber ability to literally devastate a country and put into the dark ages with a cyber attack. We don't have that. We do that, Russia can't touch our elections. Russia can't do anything to us at all. We'll just cyber attack them into the Stone Age. That's what we should be able to do. We can't now. Third, special forces. The United States has the best special forces in the world, and we should at least triple the amount that we have and dismantle most of the rest of our military. Most of it, not all, but a huge amount. We don't need all our tanks and all our fighter jets. We need special forces. If we had a bunch of special forces, there's another Osama bin Laden. We send our special forces after him. Within 2 years, almost any place in the world, he's dead. There's almost no one who could get to more places than our special forces could. And the last piece is a Navy large enough to ensure that we have fair and safe trading lanes. That's what our military should look like. That's it. All these other things, we don't need them at all. Someone messes with us, if it's an individual player, which most will be, special forces take care of it. If it's a state player, the threat is, you want to affect our elections, we'll cyber attack you. We'll give you 6 Chernobyls. That's the way you deal with today's, what it should be. You asked what it should be. We're not there. That's my perfect world of our military. That's how we deal with it. You want to cross over to Germany? cyber attack. You literally can't get your troops across the board anymore because you're not going to have power plants. That's the kind of thing I want. No more invasions. Invasions are silly. Invasions don't work. That's why we don't invade anymore. There's no more tank battles. Intellectual property is far more important than physical property. Not even close. Far more important. What are Chinese going to invade California? What are they going to get? Nice views, I guess. But the intellectual property will be gone. It'll be in Oklahoma by the time the Chinese get there.
Well, yeah, we're not worried about like mainland invasions. It's just more that like if smaller countries in Eastern Europe started to get rolled over by Russia.
The Brits have nuclear weapons. The French have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but Great Britain and France that's really far to the west. There's a lot of countries you can roll over.
We're way further than they are.
Yeah, I know, but the point of like NATO is that like if you invade one of us, you invade all of us. So now you have the full force of the United States brought to your doorstep if you decide to start invading countries.
One of the major reasons why Russia is fighting us and doesn't trust us is because we expanded NATO. That's how we lost the Cold War. Lost the peace. I'm sorry. We won the war, lost the peace. The peace should have been the Soviet Union collapses. Great. NATO's disbanded, or at least America leaves it. We don't need what we need it for. Walk away. Walk away. That would have told the Russians and the people who all took over Russia were from the Soviet Union that we're not their enemy anymore. But we didn't do that. Instead, we encroached all the way to their border, trying to get every single person to NATO as if Russia was still a threat, and Russia acted accordingly. Terrible foreign policy. So you
think the only reason why Russia, like,
not what I said. The biggest reason why they don't trust us is because we lost the peace after the Cold War.
Okay. I feel like other countries, especially the ones that have opted to join NATO, would much prefer some sort of like warm relationship with a stronger foreign power rather than just kind of being left at the mercy of if Russia decides to become active again. But I guess in your mind, your idea is that if we would have just disbanded NATO, everybody would have been more friendly and things would have chilled?
I think Russia wouldn't have been as aggressive. That's what I think. They would not have been as aggressive. And here's my example. We were punitive against Germany in World War I. That got us World War II. We were kind to Germany and Japan after World War II. Not a problem. Best buddies. Generally speaking, the nicer you are after a war, the better off it is. One of the reasons why World War II lasted so long is because of the incompetent Roosevelt saying unconditional surrender. That was the reason. There was no need to nuke Japan. There was no need to even do D-Day. Wasn't required. None of it. The Germans were already talking surrender. So were the Japanese. But Roosevelt said unconditional. And because they were harsh and terrible regimes, they projected themselves onto them and thought unconditional means we're all going into camps. Because we would put you in camps. So they assumed they were all going into camps. So they said, you know what? Fight to the death. Because we're not going into camps. That's what wound up happening. They tried to kill Hitler 44 times. 44 times. Imagine if we instead, Germany, we got you. You're losing in Russia. You're losing in America. We're getting ready to invade France. We're already in Italy. The war's over. Guys, give us Hitler and maybe whatever, 24 other massive Nazis. Hand them over to us. We'll talk peace. We'll talk peace. Give us the Nazis. Overthrow him. And we want these guys. We want their heads on a pike. Give us their heads on a pike. We'll talk peace. Imagine what would happen. The last year of the war, all those Jews in the camps not killed. All the Americans who died. All those Russians who died. Not dead.
It would be nice if we could run like a historical counterfactual, but I mean, like we can't. I'm pretty sure Japan was literally ready to fight to the last man standing.
They were not.
They
were talking to Russia already in 45 about peace because we wouldn't talk to them. They were already devastated.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could see how it would have went otherwise. I mean,
well, even if I'm wrong, I'll go back to my same thing I told. Even if I'm wrong, would it have hurt to talk to them? If we were wrong, the same thing would have happened. There's no lose in what I'm saying. If we said, we'll talk to you about it, and they would have said, go to hell, fight us. Okay,
I'm pretty sure the Japanese were like, I'm not a World War II historian expert, but I know that it's been, because I know there's kind of like the story that Japan had already tried to surrender after the first bomb and we decided to refuse to surrender. Every time I've looked into that, it seems to the historical consensus I seem to find is that like any tepid talks about peace or whatever didn't really have any teeth behind them. And Japan was like willing to go the distance when it came to fighting the US because they didn't consider like a ground invasion to be possible by the US and that they were ready to bear out that war for as long as possible. But I mean, like, again, like it's hard to argue like what would have happened otherwise. Like,
no, but
the only thing that I can look to historically is that like we tried like appeasement for Germany and it didn't work. The idea that we could just say like, oh, give us your commanders and, you know, like we'll stop fighting, or give us your commanders and the war will end or whatever. I don't know if they would do that without they're also like losing tons of ground because an actual ground war is being fought.
Yeah, no, maybe you're right. You're right. My point is my tactics, just like what I'm always saying. If I'm wrong, the same thing still happens. It doesn't get worse if I'm wrong, right? If we talk to the Germans and said, hey, give us your Nazis, whatever number we want, and we'll start talking peace. If they go to hell with you, invade, then we still would have invaded anyway. Like it would have changed. But maybe they would have been like, really? I would like you to stop bombing us. Our economy is shot. You've been bombing us, so our cities are rubble. Yes, we'd like you to stop bombing us, please. We'll give you the Nazis. They might have. If they didn't, we still keep going. But if they did, we at least show a humanism. And again, I'll say it again. We show a humanism that would have allowed the people a chance for all those people who died. Have you ever seen the movie?
Well, surrender is always on the table, right? It's not like they.
No, it isn't. Not in World War II. It was not. It was not.
Well, but why wasn't it?
Because Roosevelt said unconditional surrender. That's the reason. Though? That means there's no conditions. You don't discuss it. You just go.
But more importantly, it meant forfeiture of like the territories that they conquered, right? Like we're not going to let Japan or Germany just like, okay, we surrender. But everything that we captured is still ours, right? But like when you talk about like unconditional surrender, like you're talking about like forfeiture of like of all the territories you capture. Like
unconditional surrender means we will do what we want with your leadership, your land, and your population. We will do whatever we want. We'll take all of your land. We will not allow Germany to exist anymore. That kind of stuff happened. We will not allow your nation to exist anymore. We will take a chunk of it, give it to the Netherlands, a chunk of it, and give it to Poland, a chunk of it, give it to France and Austria. You no longer exist as a nation. That's what they were thinking because that's what Germans did. The Nazis were horrible and brutal and erased cultures. So they assumed we would do it to them and they would rather die then. The Japanese did the same thing. The Japanese forced the Koreans to speak Japanese. They were erasing Korea. So they assumed we'd erase them. So we could just say, let's talk. You can still exist as a nation. You're going to have to give everything back. You're going to pay a price, but you can exist as Germany. You will still exist, which is what we're going to do anyway. But they didn't know that. They didn't believe that because they weren't that way. They were horrible. If you see the atrocities the Japanese and Germans did, I know we always talk about the Germans. Japanese were really bad too. Like they were right up there. They were really bad.
Yeah, the Unit 731 stuff and the rape of Nanking.
Absolutely. So why in the world would they have given that with unconditional? Roosevelt was so dumb thinking that. He should be like, no, we're not going to rape all your women and cart off your men to camps, which is what they did. We're not going to do that.
I don't think that was what they thought was on the table, but I guess it's hard to know. I don't think that they thought that like if we unconditionally surrendered to America, they're going to send like the rape squads over to our country like we've done to some people. But
I mean, they did. They did. Like, they did send the rape squads. Like, they did that. So why wouldn't they think that we would? But my point, again, is the same. Again, if I'm wrong, why not take the high road? Why not have the conversation? It doesn't hurt. If I'm wrong, we still bomb them and invade them anyway. And if I'm right, we have a chance at saving lives. Why wouldn't I do that? I'm not a big fan of killing people for nothing. Just not a big fan. Whether they're Germans or Nazis or Americans or Russians or whatever, I don't want to kill them for nothing. Not my thing. I'm sorry, I went way long on this, but this was a question, wasn't it? I didn't just talk for nothing.
Yeah, we were talking about stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
So we got to 3 hours. I got to do my due diligence and just plug our server here. This was hosted by Blue Politics, discord.gg/bluepolitics. It's the largest server on Discord that is dedicated towards civil discussion of politics. We've been here with Destiny and Larry Sharpe. I think it would be fantastic if we one day got you two together just to debate foreign policy. That was a great half-hour teaser there. But once again, thanks guys for coming on. It's always great to set these kinds of discussions up. This was great. And as a moderator, I was completely irrelevant, which is my favorite time. Thank you guys.
Thank you, my
thanks
friend.
for that conversation.
Destiny, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Are you are you running again for anything? Do you want to plug like a page or anything? Or?
Guys, if anybody's interested, please head over to the Sharpe Way. I'm on all the interwebs, or of course, just Google Larry Sharpe. I'm on all of it for page 1. Enjoy. I hope you guys care about what I'm doing and my ideas. And if you have any ideas, please reach out to me. My team will monitor all my social media. It'll get back to me.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, guys. See you around.